under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL Chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three. It's up and in!
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn. The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. TuneIn is remembering the biggest college sports moments of the decade, like this one from 2011, when UConn point guard Kemba Walker hits the game-winning jumper in the Big East tournament against Pittsburgh.
Here's Walker with 4, stops, moves left, steps back, the jumper, it's good! At the buzzer, and Kemba Walker has done it again!
Search college sports on TuneIn to be there for the moments that go down in history.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
These are really big numbers. I mean, what we're seeing from the Sanders campaign in particular is noteworthy to me. The last time he announced his campaign haul was after the third quarter. It was only a few hours later that he started to suffer chest pains, and we know that it was weeks that the news cycle was dominated by stories about his heart attack. And now what we've seen is those donors from the third quarter continued to give in the fourth quarter. And it's the small dollar donations, which shows a level of persistency and I would argue fervor that I think is going to continue throughout the primary.
We're talking with Isaac Boltanski of Compass Point. So
indicated the average analyst target on the stock is about $36. It's now trading near $48 a share. So it is a bit of catch up, but he's saying I see further gains in the future. Mainly, he says that's going to come from the fact that average selling prices are going to be higher. They've gained market share in the CPU space. Remember, Intel has had a shortage of those PC chips that AMD is kind of making up for, and he sees more devices in the gaming space, like from Microsoft and Sony, in the back half of the year adding, and so he sees a lot of revenue growth. He sees increased operating leverage. He thinks the picture for AMD in 2020 is looking pretty good, maybe even better than it did in 2019.
So the question has to be why.
Right.
You mentioned gaming, for example. A lot of chips are for gaming. Also, 5G is coming. Some people think it's going to be big. But what about China trade? Is that helping too? Because typically tech gets helped by that.
Well, especially this chip maker space is so sensitive to the China narrative, as it's a big market. It's an integral part of their supply chains. When you look at stock like AMD, about 40% of its revenue comes from China. So obviously the ebbs and flows in that market are really critical to the way the company performs. And when you think about the supply-demand dynamic of chips and the impact, the uncertainty from the ongoing trade war has had weighing on demand, the fact that that picture is looking a little bit brighter certainly does AMD some favors here as well.
So a lot of those factors should apply to others as well. Mm-hmm. So how are other people doing? You mentioned Intel, but how are others doing in this space?
I mean, broadly in chip making, analysts are really bullish. I was looking at what the analyst breakdown on those tracked by Bloomberg at our system on the Bloomberg terminal. 91% of analysts on AMD recommend holding or buying the stock. Only 4 recommend selling. And that actually is on the lower end of some of these chip stocks. Usually it's between 90 and 100% of analysts say that you want these stocks in your portfolio. Very few recommend selling. So people are really bullish on the semiconductor space right now. In part, that is because analysts have been calling a bottom in the chip pricing cycle. It's been, pretty flatlined for a while after a steady decline. They think that is going to rebound. And then also this China narrative, the fact that trade is maybe looking a little bit better, and it is such a vital market for so many of these companies. The picture's looking a little bit brighter as we head into 2020.
All right, sounds like a good 2020 coming up for them. Okay, thanks so much to Kaylee Alliance on AMD. Coming up next here, the U.S. deploys troops to the Middle East while Iranian-backed militias retreat from the U.S. Embassy in Baghdad. We discuss the latest and what it could mean for oil markets. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power. We are on Bloomberg Television and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. U.S. stocks are posting record gains on the first trading day of the new year. The Dow is up 177 points to 28,714. S&P 500 up 9 points. The Nasdaq up 55. Losing weight, joining a gym, and eating healthy are among the resolutions people make around the new year. One stock that might benefit is WW International, formerly known as Weight Watchers. It's up 81% from its August low. The government says the number of people making their first trip to the unemployment office fell by 2,000 last week to 222,000. That's a sign of a tight labor market. And today is National Returns Day. UPS is expecting a record 1.9 million packages to be returned. That's 26% more than a year ago. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Why has J.D. Power ranked Commonwealth Financial Network #1 in independent advisor satisfaction among financial investment firms for the 6th straight time? We think it comes down to one thing: you. Because it's your input and feedback that keeps us focused on what's most important to you and your clients and continually pushes us to be the best we can be. Maybe that's why we receive top marks in every category of the J.D. Power 2019 Advisor Satisfaction Survey. They named us #1 in client support, #1 in firm leadership, #1 in operational support, #1 in compensation, #1 in professional development support, and #1 in technology support. Ready to partner with the best? Call Commonwealth at 866-462-3638 or visit commonwealth.com and feel the power. Member FINRA SIPC, a registered investment advisor. For 2019 J.D. Power award information, visit jdpower.com/awards.
Okay, kids, Dad's gonna teach you how to dance. First, spread your feet apart. Then, pump your knee, nod your head, shake your hips, and bite your lip ever so slightly. Now, with one hand in the air, point at people with the other hand. I call that the rock star.
Dance like a dad. It's a great way to make a moment with your kids.
Now, make a face like it just smells something bad.
Visit fatherhood.gov, brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services and the Ad Council.
When you put together the puzzle that's today's business and political environment,
Can you make a call given this swirl of data?
Is that already being reflected in the way that they're priced?
make sure you have all the pieces.
Which segments of Alphabet's business are most likely to come under scrutiny?
They're getting mixed signals from governments.
He's failed to gain traction.
Will he have to abide by a subpoena?
Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business, Radio.com, and iHeartRadio apps, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
From New York, this is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and Radio. I'm David Weston. For Bloomberg First Word News, we go now to Viviana Hurtado.
David, today, U.S. Defense Secretary Mark Esper said the United States has indications more Iranian attacks may be in the offing. If that happens, he says the U.S. will take action preemptively if it has enough warning. Mr. Esper speaking 2 days after an Iran-sponsored Iraqi militia attempted to break into the U.S. embassy in Baghdad. Israel's Supreme Court is declining to weigh in on whether Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu can return to his post now that he's been indicted. The decision postpones any ruling on his political future until after the March election. Mr. Netanyahu was indicted in November on charges of bribery, fraud, and breach of trust. Israeli cabinet members are required to resign if indicted, but the rule does not apply to the prime minister. An Austrian conservative leader, Sebastian Kurz, says his party's coalition with the Greens offers the best of both worlds and will allow both partners to keep their election promises. Mr. Kurz is set to return to power as Austria's chancellor after a 7-month hiatus. The Green Party would join Austria's government for the first time. Mr. Kurz's previous coalition government with the far-right Freedom Party collapsed in May. And former Housing Secretary Julian Castro has dropped out of the race for the Democratic presidential nomination. Mr. Castro was the only Latino candidate and supported progressive policies, but he was unable to rise in the polls. In a video message, Mr. Castro said, quote, "It simply isn't our time." Global News, 24 hours a day on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg, powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Viviana Hurtado. This is Bloomberg. David.
Thanks very much, Viviana. The United States is deploying about 750 troops to the Middle East after the United States Embassy in Baghdad was stormed by Iraqi militiamen. The pro-Iranian demonstrators retreated yesterday after 2 days of intense protests at the embassy complex. U.S. Secretary of State Mike Pompeo addressed the attack in an interview yesterday.
Well, what you saw was Iranian-backed terrorists. Many of them are individuals that have been designated terrorists by the United States and others, coming to the American embassy and posing a risk to American diplomats and personnel inside the embassy. You saw President Trump direct a quick, decisive, prudent response.
For more, welcome now from Austin, Texas, Matthew Bay. He's senior global analyst at Stratfor. So, Matthew, welcome. Good to have you here. I heard one of the leaders of the protests, maybe one of the militiamen, come on air and say, "We made our point and now we can withdraw." Did they make their point, and what was that point to the United States?
Well, the point to the United States was that if they're going to continue to attack Iranian-backed militias, or themselves, the PMUs, so-called PMUs in Iraq, they're going to, demonstrate at the U.S. Embassy in Iraq. One of the things that we have to watch moving forward, to see if they actually continue to stay off the streets, is they're also looking at messaging towards the domestic population, and they are trying to get the Iraqi parliament to reopen the discussion on whether or not U.S. troops should even be deployed to Iraq. So that is something that they have said. They've come out. Some of the militia leaders have come out and said that they'll be watching what the Iraqi parliament does over the next week, specifically regarding the potential expulsion of U.S. forces. So that is something that they are also looking at when they are doing some of this messaging. It's not just to the U.S.
So Matthew, as I recall, the attacks by the U.S., the missile attacks, were in response to attacks, more than one attack, frankly, on U.S. facilities, including the most recent one that killed a U.S. contractor. So as long as we have troops deployed in the region, we have contractors in the region, don't we run the risk of further attacks from them? And can we allow them to attack us, even kill our people, without responding?
Right. So, yes, we have definitely seen an uptick in the attacks against bases that are hosting U.S. forces and U.S. contractors over the last few months. This is a part of Iran's strategy and Iran's proxies in Iraq strategy of essentially increasing the bar for the U.S. in the sense of the risk for the U.S. essentially of maintaining the current aggressive posture towards Iran. When they're attacking, say, the U.S. forces in Iraq, they're saying, hey, you know what, you're here, it's cost for you here, we don't want you here. It's basically just protesting the U.S.'s involvement, and obviously it was only a matter of time before you had a U.S. person unfortunately killed and obviously other U.S. Personnel injured. So this is something that I think we're going to continue, and if the U.S. wants to continue to up the escalation with Iran, that means that these risks, they're not going away, whether it be in Iraq, whether it be somewhere in the Persian Gulf. As we've seen in the past, Iran has definitely had its allies and itself directly attack oil interests in the region. Expanding beyond that to include U.S. personnel, U.S. citizens, U.S. interests is something that is completely possible in 2020.
So Matthew, you specialize in oil and gas analysis. Is this affecting Iraq's ability to produce oil?
Right now, it's not having a major impact on oil production. If you look where the protests are, you look at where the embassy is, it's not in the south where most of the oil production is. However, Iraq right now, it's in a very delicate political situation. You have a caretaker government, essentially. They are looking at appointing a new prime minister. You have anti-government protests that are distinct from the anti-U.S. protests that we've seen. And some of those have been in the south. Some of them have in the past been carried out at locations of oil companies. As we look at this very dicey situation, especially if you look at a really concerted effort by Iranian-backed politicians to really make the U.S. Kind of the bad person here in the sense of their deployments and really start to kick them out, or even consider kicking them out, we could definitely see oil exports that are in Iraq being affected in several different ways. One of those ways would be things like protests at facilities that are forced to be shut down in the south, whether those protests are against U.S. companies or Western companies. It depends on whether or not it is the Iranian-backed protesters or the pro-Iraqi nationalist protesters. And then the other way that we can definitely have it out is if we look long term. I mean, the Iraqi security situation is completely dependent on the United States, and if we have the U.S. pulling out, or even President Trump unilaterally withdrawing forces or reducing the U.S. presence because of these continued attacks against the U.S., we could definitely see Islamic State and other jihadist groups also start to regain strength in Iraq as well.
Matthew, let's turn to a different strategic interest of the United States when it comes to oil and gas, and that is the Nord Stream 2 pipeline under the North Sea from Russia down into Germany. We saw President Trump really go after Germany on this subject, saying you're really giving a hostage to fortune in dealing with the Russians. Where does that stand right now, the Nord Stream 2?
So the U.S. in the National Defense Authorization Act that was passed last year put into place sanctions that essentially would target any pipeline vessels to complete the pipeline. Allseas, which was the company that was leading the construction of the offshore part, had already announced initially that they will stop and freeze their work on the pipeline because of U.S. sanctions. That leaves roughly 100 kilometers of the pipeline left to be constructed. Allseas only had 20 days left of construction they expected. So we're looking at a last-minute or a last-ditch effort by the U.S. actually succeeding in some ways. Now, Russia has come back and said that they have the capability to finish the pipeline themselves. However, when you just look at the number of pipelaying vessels that are under Russia's control, you're talking about just a handful. And one of the ones that people are watching is actually based in the Far East right now, so it would take months to get to the North Sea, or to the North Sea and then into the Baltic Sea. So this is something that is going to delay the pipeline. And now, when we juxtapose that with other crucial negotiations that have been going on in late December, which was over natural gas transit agreement that Russia has with Ukraine, that also got finalized. Ukraine had been playing very hardball trying to get a very lengthy deal. Those contracts were set to expire at the end of 2019. They've now been extended for 5 years under different terms. But the point being, though, is that Russia wants to eliminate some of the dependency that it has on Ukraine, which it now sees the government in Kiev as essentially being not in their interest to prop up, could be a political risk to them if Ukraine wanted to shut down natural gas to hurt Russia, for example. They're looking at Nord Stream 2 and also Turk Stream as potential alternatives. And if we have Nord Stream 2 being delayed indefinitely, that throws a wrench in those ideas.
And that's my question. Is it delayed indefinitely? Will it get built, in your judgment? And within what kind of time frame, Nord Stream 2?
I think that it will eventually get built. I think that it may not. I don't think it'll be built or finalized into complete service by the end of 2020 necessarily. But I think sometime down the road, you'll definitely have some sort of negotiation emerge that will allow that pipeline to be built. I think that will be, though, done in a coordinated fashion with the longer-term agreements with Ukraine. I mean, the German position, for that matter, and quite in the U.S. position at times, had been that the Nord Stream 2 pipeline was kind of, in coordinating those negotiations were happening at the same time as the Ukraine negotiations, and that if you had a long-term deal that was beneficial to Ukraine, then the Nord Stream 2 pipeline could also still go forward.
Okay, Matthew, thanks so much for being with us today. Really appreciate it. That's Matthew Bay of Stratfor coming to us from Austin, Texas. And for more on the impact on oil and on commodities more generally, turn to Commodities Edge. That's coming out at 1 o'clock this afternoon Eastern Time on Bloomberg Television. Coming up here, demonstrators across India rang in the new year with street party protests. More details on their fight against the country's new religion-based citizenship law. That's coming up next. This is Balance of Power. We are on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
You're not supposed to begin the race before the starting.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
TuneIn is remembering the biggest college sports moments of the decade, like this one from 2016, when Tennessee quarterback Josh Dobbs throws a Hail Mary to the end zone as time expires against Georgia.
4 seconds to go. Dobbs drops back, looks, loads up, fires long for the end zone. The pass is going to be caught by Tennessee. Tennessee wins! Caught it by Tennessee, Jawan Jennings. Jennings makes the catch in the end zone on the Hail Mary.
Search college sports on TuneIn to be there for the moments that go down in history.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn. We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Start hearing more of what you want. Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations, live commercial-free news, and every live NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL game. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown.
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
And they don't have
their constitution and their laws do not allow Hindus to be equal citizens the way secular India gives equal rights and equal rights of citizenship to all its people regardless of religion. So they said there are a lot of Hindus who have been targeted, particularly in Pakistan, I think, which is the main center of worry for Indians. And they said if there are Hindu migrants from Pakistan who wish to return to India, which they consider their motherland, they should be given citizenship. The problem here is that the question is why restrict it to just these three countries, and why identify religion as the basis? Many people in India, particularly the liberal order, find it revolting. They say, if you're so concerned about Hindus, one, why not Hindus from Sri Lanka? There are Tamil Hindus who have been discriminated against in Sri Lanka. Why don't you offer them a passage to citizenship? One. And two, did it really require a law to do this? Because all these years this has been done, this could have been done, and this has been done through executive action, through administrative fiat. Invoking a law and passing it through Parliament really raised the temperature, and there was a sense that it went against India's secular credo. The government argues, of course, that no Indian, whether it is Hindu or Muslim or any other religion, is being denied citizenship, that it only applies to people outside India, that these three countries who are coming into India. But somehow that really doesn't wash, and a lot of people are seeing this as a part of an overall move to sort of Hinduize India, which has always been a secular republic.
Well, and it raises questions about why the government decided to do this, and particularly Mr. Modi decided to do it. As I understand it, there's a substantial portion of the population of India that is Muslim. He must have had a sense that this would trigger some real substantial reaction. Do you think he's surprised the reaction he got?
I don't think so. I think I see this as a part of a sort of global sort of upsurge in sort of right-wing politics. I mean, this is something that's happened in the United States, in Britain, in Brazil, and many places in Europe. There is an uptick in right-wing nationalist and what I call nativist consolidation. These are basically majority people in US, in UK, who are fearful of either immigrants or foreigners or religious minorities who feel their old way and their old domination is being threatened. So in all these countries, you see an uptick in right-wing politics, in conservative nativist politics, and I think in India too, this is a part. In a sense, this is also a sort of pushback against the globalization and liberalization of the last 25 years. These are people who feel that they're losing their way of life and their sense of dominating society, and they're pushing back. You see that the very distinct trend in the United States too.
When we've seen demonstrations elsewhere around the world, often it can be triggered by one thing, but then expands out. I mean, you see this, for example, I would say in Chile, for example. As we look at India right now, as you look at the demonstrations, is it limited to the issue of this as a perceived anti-Muslim move, or has it now spread out to other complaints that people may have on the street?
So far, the sense I get is it's confined to this, but I wouldn't be surprised if it, which is why I think the government is keeping a very, very close watch on the economy. There is a certain sense of dismay that the Indian economy has not grown, or in fact there's been a relapse in its growth. It's sliding back. There are a lot of issues with the economy. People are unhappy. It hasn't sparked off. I mean, I haven't heard of any kind of food riots or anything, because so far I think the government's been very careful to keep a tight lid on inflation, for instance. It's still within bounds. And so I wouldn't be surprised if it does, catch on, and other problems also get associated with it. But so far it's confined to this issue, yes.
Is it affecting U.S.-Indian relations in any significant way? As we know, we have the first Indian-American woman now serving in Congress. Her name is Pramila Jayapal, and she sponsored some legislation, and apparently the foreign minister, we would call foreign minister of India, refused to go up to Congress if she was going to be in the room. Is it affecting relations between the United States and India, or maybe more specifically between Congress and India?
I'd say between the Democratic leadership, Democratic Congress in India, yes. But surprisingly, the Trump administration has been fairly sympathetic to India, not just with this issue, but also with other issues associated associated with it, like, the Indian sort of move to change the status quo in Kashmir. So with the administration, in fact, I see a sense of almost kinship between the BJP, which is the ruling party in India, and the Republican Party and the Trump administration. But yes, insofar as, liberal democratic lawmakers are concerned, I think there's a certain degree of tension. There are not too many of them, who have a problem with India. I think India still has good bipartisan ties with the U.S. Congress, but there are a few lawmakers, Pramila Jayapal being most prominent among them, and then the members of the so-called Squad, Ilan Omar and others, who have problems with what they perceive as, the Hinduization of India.
We're speaking with Chidanand Rajgata. He is a columnist with the Times of India. So let me expand on your reference to a kinship between the Trump administration on the one hand and Mr. Modi's administration in India on the other. We just had Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State, go over to India. Was that kinship revealed there? What, if anything, was advanced in U.S.-Indian relations in that visit?
Oh, absolutely. I think the Trump had, beyond all this, beyond the immediate, issue of this law and also the Kashmir issue, I think successive U.S. administrations across both parties have looked to advance ties with India, and that has, the larger picture here is Washington looking at India as a sort of counterweight to China. So going back to the Clinton administration, which started it all, and the Bush administration built on it, the Obama administration built on that, and the Trump administration has carried forward. But I think there's also a sort of personal sense of, for lack of a better word, brotherhood between Mr. Trump and Mr. Modi. I think they see a little likeness in each other. They look back and they want to consolidate their base. And so, yes, both, Mr. Pompeo, there have been high-level visits, and, Mr. Modi has visited here a couple of times. There was a rousing rally in Houston between Mr. Modi, with Mr. Modi and Trump appearing on stage together. So, yes, this administration and this president in particular has taken U.S.-India ties to even greater heights, I think.
Thanks so very much to Chidanand Rajgata. He is author of The Horse That Flew, and we're going to have much more with him on Bloomberg Radio starting at 1 o'clock Eastern. Coming up here, Japanese authorities are missing Carlos Ghosn, who fled Tokyo for his native Beirut by means still cloaked in mystery. But it may not just be the Japanese who would like him back. The two car companies that he led have suffered badly in 2019 without him at the helm. We talk about the plight of Nissan and Renault in a post-Ghosn world. This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio.
When you want to deeply understand what's in a portfolio,
$2 billion, not what they were going for it.
Or the next big thing.
He said that from day one, they're going to be profitable.
Or why the excitement is waning.
Who were really worried about recession.
You can find out fastest at Bloomberg Business Week. Carol Messer and Jason Kelly, weekday afternoons at 2 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Imagine being fired because of who you love. Imagine being denied medical treatment because of who you marry. Imagine being evicted because of who you are. Millions of Americans don't have to imagine this. They have to live it. Because in 31 states, it's legal to discriminate against LGBT people. Get the facts at beyondido.org. Brought to you by the Gill Foundation and the Ad Council.
25 years ago, NJIT graduate Dick Sweeney co-founded Keurig Green Mountain, a company whose incredible innovations changed the way the world brews a cup of coffee. Today, he lectures widely on business leadership and is a strong advocate for NJIT's work to combine business education with the power of STEM.
NJIT is definitely fostering the innovative thinking for budding entrepreneurs simply because that's the world we live in. NJIT is producing students that have been trained, educated, and given the business acumen to be a contributor to a company. The distinct mission is to develop great STEM scholars. The attributes I've always looked for in team members are heart, smarts, guts, and luck. So we want people with passion, intelligence, courage, and never discount luck. The student coming out of NJIT has experienced all of that.
NJIT, New Jersey Institute of Technology. Learn more at njit.edu.
This is Balance of Power on Bloomberg Television and on radio. I'm David Weston. The juiciest story of the new year, at least so far, is the dramatic and mysterious escape of Carlos Ghosn from house arrest in Tokyo, showing up at his luxury home in Beirut. Theories abound about how it happened, with secret private plane flights, rumors of smuggling him out in an instrument case, and Turkish authorities now retaining 7 people in Istanbul, where he apparently switched planes. But the one thing we know for sure is that the 2 car companies he ran have not done well since his arrest. We welcome now Craig Trudell, who covers the auto industry for Bloomberg right here in New York. So, Craig, welcome. Happy New Year.
Happy New Year.
So let's start with, I read your piece that was fascinating about which car companies did well, which did poorly. Ferrari, actually, ironically, shot the lights out.
Absolutely.
High margins and increased volume. But you see Nissan and Renault at the bottom of the league table.
No coincidence there. With both of these companies, neither immediate successor for Carlos Ghosn survived 2019. Both have been replaced. Both companies are sort of a mess. Carlos Ghosn always had a sort of a knack for artfully denying or downplaying, the tensions between these 2 companies. Those tensions really came to the fore once he was out. You had Nissan, very aggressively going after him. Renault kind of, not being in such a rush, but then also coming out and raising some concerns about his expenses as well. All of that was a distraction for companies that, maybe had bigger eyes than their stomachs under Mr. Ghosn when he was still there.
And some would say, I think maybe led by Mr. Ghosn, that actually the reasons for her arrest were directly tied to what you just described. That the fact is he wanted to further integrate these companies, and he says the people over in Japan in Nissan didn't want that, and that's what led to it. That's his point of view.
Absolutely, and I think there's something to that. It's hard to credibly deny those accusations while still sort of acknowledging that perhaps he was up to some wrongdoing, and we don't have to speculate about that necessarily, in the sense that the SEC did hit him with a penalty last year for failure to disclose some of the compensation that he was going to receive in retirement. So, there was some wrongdoing here. It's all a question of, whether that warranted the surprise arrest and the treatment that he received, which I think, a lot of the global community has questioned whether or not that was very Yeah,
I suspect we're going to hear a lot more of that from Mr. Ghosn, who says next week he's going to go to the media and explain his side. So that'll be very, very interesting. So they're suffering in part because there's strife within these 2 companies, it appears. We've reported on that before. But do they also have larger issues? I mean, if you look at the auto industry overall, there's some softness in demand in a lot of places around the world, including North America. There's a huge shift from passenger vehicles into trucks and SUVs. Is Nissan positioned to take advantage of that shift?
Potentially on the SUV side. On the truck side, that was a huge miss under Ghosn. He had big ambitions, especially in this market, right, for the Titan pickup to really sort of give Detroit a run for the money. Absolutely. A few years ago, he talked about, wanting to do 100,000 units with that truck. He's come nowhere close with that. And we know that that's where Detroit's bread still is buttered to this day. He was unable to really make a sort of serious run in that segment, and that was costly. I think just generally as well, the Japanese and Korean car makers are known for their passenger cars, and so they've been a little bit on the slower side and less successful in making this pivot, especially in this market that's been so significant to SUVs from cars.
In the meantime, all the car companies are consolidating and getting a lot of capital to put into electric vehicles and autonomous vehicles, and they're having trouble with strife. It's
Absolutely.
Not good for them. Okay, many thanks to Craig Trudell, who leads the autos team at Bloomberg News. Coming up on Balance Power, we're going to continue over on Bloomberg Radio. In our second hour, we'll talk more about India's economy with Chinan Rajkata. Also ahead, Isaac Stonefish of Asia Side. This is Bloomberg.
This is a Bloomberg Pursuits Look at Luxury. New Year, some new honors in the world of finance. The United Kingdom's New Year's honors list finds the Queen is appointed former Royal Bank of Scotland CEO Ross McEwen, British business banks Keith Morgan, and Hermes Investment Management's Sakar Nusebi as commanders of the Order of the British Empire. France may be wishing every day was New Year's. One of France's quintessential luxuries, champagne, is losing support from domestic drinkers. They're already facing the threat of U.S. tariffs and the UK's exit from the European Union. A decade-long slide in domestic demand got worse in 2018. Sales that year in France fell by 6.5 million bottles. The slump may have continued last year. So even though the flow of Dom Perignon and Pernod Ricard's Perrier Jouet have ridden a wave of export demand over the past decade, domestic drinkers are still key to the industry. I'm Joan Doniger, Bloomberg Radio.
To see something far away, you can either get a powerful telescope or you can go there.
Talk about export numbers because they've been quite shocking. In Korea, we saw Singapore, Japan too.
Bloomberg Daybreak Asia.
How should investors be positioning?
When you take a look at the consumers in China, it remains challenging.
We go there.
To what extent is access to cheap credit part of the equation?
Tonight at 6 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Sweet strawberry icing. You're in Goodwill, and just past that vintage denim jacket you spot miniature donut earrings. You lean in. That's the scent of shopping success. Because at Goodwill, every item you buy funds local job training and more. So bring home those donut earrings and bring home so much good to your community. Goodwill. Bring good home. Brought to you by Goodwill and the Ad Council.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
I'm Steve Meyer, president of SEI's Investment Manager Services. At SEI, we understand the emerging forces that will define success for asset managers and what firms will need to compete tomorrow. That's why we continually optimize SEI's global operating platform. If your business requires greater agility, our advanced technology, integrated best-in-class systems, and multi-asset expertise can be your catalyst for business transformation.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
From the financial capital of the world, 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks beginning the new year on the front foot, building on strong gains from many asset classes last year as investors cheer the latest policy move by China's central bank to support its economy. The dollar and treasuries strengthen. We've got the 10-year up 10.30 the yield on this Thursday, first trading day of the new year, 1.88%. S&P up 12 at a record 32.43, up 0.4%. The Dow now rallying 201 points at or near the best level of the day, up another 0.7%. And NASDAQ is up 70 points at 9,043. For NASDAQ, that's a gain of 0.8%. What about the gains from 2019 continuing into 2020? Jonathan Mackay is head of sales at Schroders Wealth Management.
If you look at the stocks that have run since the beginning of September, when essentially 10-year rates bottomed, and you had sort of this sentiment shift from we might be going into a recession to you might get a trade deal, you might actually get something done or some certainty with Brexit. Granted the news isn't great on Brexit, but things like that, less uncertainty is by definition more certainty. And so I think that allows the fundamentals to start coming through a little bit better than they have.
So the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all climbing to records following one of the best years for U.S. stocks in the past decades. Right now, the S&P 500 index up 11, up 0.4%. We have got gold up 0.5%, 15.25 the ounce. Crude oil, a retreat today, down 0.3%, $60.87 a barrel. It is 1:02 on Wall Street. That means it's time for the Market Drivers Report with a focus on American depository receipts. And here is Dave Wilson.
Thanks, Charlie. ADRs are rising more than U.S. shares. The S&P ADR index is up 0.7%, and the S&P 500 is only higher by 0.4%. The Chinese ADRs are rallying in U.S. trading after the country cut the amount of cash that banks have to keep in reserve. Internet company Baidu has climbed 7.8%. Travel service Trip.com Group has advanced 10.8%. And social media company Weibo has risen 9.2%. Israel's Delek Group has gained 10.7%. The oil and gas producer is higher for a second day as a natural gas pipeline from an offshore field goes into service, paving the way for exports to Egypt. And Delek climbed Tuesday by 7.7%. At the same time, the UK's Tullow oil has slipped 1% to less than 40 cents per ADR. A discovery off the coast of Guyana was smaller than the company projected before drilling, and that shortfall followed the departures of Tullow's CEO and exploration chief last month. And Canadian cannabis producers are falling after taking a tumble last year. Cannabis growth has dropped 5.4%. Aurora Cannabis has fallen 6%. And Tilray has slipped 3.9%, Charlie.
And we thank you very much, Dave Wilson, tracking those American depository receipts. Tesla's price target raised by more than $100 at Canaccord Genuity, which wrote that the trend toward electric vehicles will only accelerate in 2020. Its target now raised to $515. Right now, Tesla is at $428.06, up today by 2.3%. Recapping stocks higher. In fact, at records, S&P up 11, up 0.3%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Balance of Power.
We have the strongest economy by far in the world.
We're going to grow our trade relationship.
I know what's broken. I know how to fix it.
Where the world of politics meets the world of business.
They've got the money they need to run a very competitive race.
We've got now a real crunch few days for Brexit.
We want certainty in the markets. We want certainty in our trading relationships.
The administration is trying to create a new divided world.
Balance of Power with David Weston on Bloomberg Radio.
Kim Jong-un threatens the United States with a new strategic weapon. The new year brings new rules for Uber in California, and Indian Prime Minister Modi has big plans for growing his economy. From the Bloomberg Interactive Broker Studio, we welcome to the second hour of Balance of Power. Prime Minister Modi of India was re-elected with a surprisingly large margin last year, which renewed expectations that he'll make substantial reforms to India's economy. Still with us is Chidanand Rajgata. He's a columnist with the Times of India. So, Mr. Rajgata, when we knew about Prime Minister Modi at beginning, when he was still the governor of a province, we knew about his economic reforms. And when he became Prime Minister, we expected, a lot of the world expected a lot out of him. Not as much got done, I think, as people expected the first term. Is that going to change now?
Well, actually, the first term was when he came into office with a reputation as a reformer. There was a lot of talk about the Gujarat model, as they called it. He was chief minister of a state of Gujarat, and the sense was that he had done some good work there, and that he'd carry that to New Delhi at the federal union level and implement it. Initially, it was pretty promising, and unfortunately, towards the end of his first term, I think he and his associates found it more convenient to run on a sort of nationalistic platform for re-election rather than economic achievements, because they found that they had not really met the early promise that they had shown. So in the second term, it's kind of looking even harder because the economy has turned south. There are a lot of issues. A lot of it goes back to the first term when there was unmet promises, unresolved promises. The first term was his best bet. Oil prices were low. There was a lot of things going for the Indian economy. But where it got derailed was the first fatal mistake that Mr. Modi and his associates made, and is very evident in hindsight, of course, hindsight 2020 as it turns out now, was the demonetization, when they delegitimized a lot of currency in the hope of flushing out what's called black money in India to get rid of the kind of parallel economy, and that didn't work out very well. So yes, it's looking even harder in the second term. Right now, every possible index in India, other than the stock market, is showing signs of a recession, or it's just not met its potential.
Is there a consensus, or anything approaching a consensus among the private business community, about what needs to get done? What are the top 2 or 3 priorities?
Yes, in fact, the private industry has been fairly vocal in pressing the government, to roll back, some of the sort of draconian economic measures that were proposed initially. And the finance minister, Mrs. Nirmala Sitharaman, has actually acquiesced to some of them. They have, a rollback. Basically, there was riding on this upsurge of nationalism. There was this really get tough policy vis-a-vis Indian businesses, which didn't work out very well because it scared a lot of businesses, it scared a lot of investors, and so the government has eased back on some of that. But it requires, there's a lot more to be done, and at the very fundamental level, this government has failed to create the kind of employment opportunity which is so important for India. Imagine this is a country with a huge workforce, and the basic premise of India's growth was actually its demographic dividend, that it has a fantastic demographic profile of 500 million plus people who are employable, who are in their 20s, and if you really provide them employment, that's where the economy would really grow. Right. And that failed to happen because they did not move fast enough, to open up manufacturing. And even when U.S.-China relations went south, starting a couple of years ago, when a lot of companies started looking beyond China, India was simply not ready to take on the flow of manufacturing jobs.
Mr. Rajgata, let me just interrupt for a moment because the headline has just crossed the Bloomberg that the FDA has issued a limited ban on some flavored vaping products. That's a much more local interest here in the United States. But the reports that this will be coming down the pike, President Trump had promised something like this, and the idea was to really curtail some of the flavors that are thought to appeal to teens and make it much more a matter. If you want to vape, it's got to taste like tobacco or maybe menthol. So we've just had that headline. We don't have to address it, but I wanted our audience to know about it. So you were talking about the huge demographic dividend potentially and getting some of the young people to work. In this country, at least people think they know what we need to do to get pro-growth. What is the growth rate in India right now? What's the potential?
So here again, it's amazing. Over the last few years, there have been so many doubts cast on the figures given by India. There's been revision of some of the metrics and how they are calculated. The government claims that it's growing at 5.56%, but there are economists, including a former economic advisor to the government of India, who claim that it is at least 2% lower than what the government states. So there are some estimates which go as low as 4%, even lower sometimes. But broadly, I think they're growing around 5%. But the need, the assumption in India always has been India needs to grow between 8 and 10%. 10% to catch up with China in the long run, 8% at least to stay in the race, and 8% was what they achieved for the longest time. For about a decade, it was averaging at 8%, but in the last 5 years, it certainly dropped. The government has set a target of reaching the economy to 5 trillion by 2025. That looks impossible unless you're growing at 10%, and 10% looks way beyond reach right now.
Fiscal stimulus?
Well, the government has been careful not to, go down that route and, spend too much by not caring about deficits. I think they're worried about inflation. Inflation is a very potent election issue in India. In India, it's said that elections are often won and lost on the basis of the price of onions. Absolutely, because it's an everyday cooking item, important to Indian kitchens. Okay. So the government's very conscious of not going down the spending route.
Okay, many thanks. Really appreciate you being with us. Chidnand Rajgata from the Times of India. 2020 marks the decennial U.S. Census. That means we're going to reapportion our congressional seats. We're going to talk with Greg Giroux for BGAV on that. This is Bloomberg.
What do you count? Interest rates?
If you get marginally higher interest rates, does that bring the PE multiple in?
Trade figures?
China driving a tectonic shift in the availability of money.
Employment data?
What is happening with the headcount?
You could just leave all that to us.
Is it a one-and-done tariff adjustment?
Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell. Right where it counts. Bloomberg Surveillance. Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
Adopt US Kids presents What to Expect When You're Expecting a Teenager. Learning the lingo.
GOAT.
GOAT, acronym, stands for greatest of all time. As in, spaghetti sandwiches for dinner? They're my fave. Dad, you're the GOAT.
You don't have to speak teen to be a perfect parent. Thousands of teens in foster care will love you just the same. Visit adoptuskids.org. Brought to you by the U.S. Department of Health and Human Services, Adopt U.S. Kids, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Hi, I'm Danica Patrick. Watching my nieces grow, play, and learn is amazing, but not every child gets to be carefree. 1 in 6 kids in the U.S. are hungry. This breaks my heart, and it's something that Feeding America is working to change. Each year, the Feeding America network of food banks rescues billions of pounds of good food that would have gone to waste and gives it to families in need. To help, visit feedingamerica.org.
Brought to you by Feeding America and the Ad Council.
This is not a cat. This is not a rocket. And this is not a sale. That's right. At Smarty Mobile, we're not having a sale. While others are slashing prices, we're introducing our best ever new plans. Take our new 30-gig data SIM for just £10 a month. With unlimited calls and texts and no speed restrictions, credit checks or contract tying you down, why shop around? New plans, great value. Now that's Smarty. Grab yours today. Search Smarty Mobile. See smarty.co.uk for terms.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught, it is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
New year, new decade. Sounds like a perfect time to start anew with a subscription to TuneIn Premium. Skip the ads and listen more in 2020 with commercial-free music and news from MSNBC, CNBC, Fox News Talk, and more. Sports fans, we got you covered too with every NFL, NBA, NHL, and college sports game. Not to mention Major League Baseball come spring training. Don't settle for same this year. Search Premium to upgrade today.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marchand scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
You can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all begin the new trading year at records in the wake of one of the best years for U.S. stocks in the past decade. Investors today cheering the latest move by China's central bank to support its economy. S&P 500 index up 9, a gain of 0.3%. The Dow advancing 1 173, up 0.6%. NASDAQ up 63. That's a gain of 0.7%. 10 years up 9/30 seconds, yield 1.88%. We've got gold up 0.5%, $15.25 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude oil is down 0.3% at $60.83 the barrel. So bottom line, stocks advancing, bullish start to the new year. Recapping, S&P up 9, up 0.3%. Balance of Power continues, the New Year's edition. And once again, here is David Weston.
Thank you so much to Charlie Pellet. From the Interactive Broker Studio, this is Balance of Power. Texas has generally gone Republican in recent national elections, and President Trump says he's confident it will vote for him this November.
I don't see how I could possibly lose Texas. They want border security. They want to protect their Second Amendment. They want a lot of things that I stand for. I don't see how it's possible, but you never know. The only way it's possible, people think you're going to win and win by a lot, and therefore they don't go out to vote.
But whether Texas is Republican or Democrat come November, it may be more important in the future based on the decennial census being done this year, a census used to allocate congressional representation among the states. Greg Giroux covers elections for Bloomberg Government, and we welcome him now. So, Greg, thanks for being here. You wrote a terrific piece about exactly what we're looking at here. Who do we expect? We don't know yet, but who do we expect the winners and losers among the states to be come the end of this year?
Well, the South and the West will continue to gain congressional representation in the reapportionment that will be conducted after the census this year. The Sun Belt, states like Texas and Florida, but also Arizona, North Carolina, Colorado, and even Oregon is slated to gain a seat. So it's a continuation of a decades-long trend we've seen where population growth is much more robust in the South and in the West than in the Midwest and the Northeast, which are slated to lose seats because the reapportionment of the 435 districts is a zero-sum game. That number is fixed, so states in the South and West that gain seats necessarily do so at the expense of states that grow more slowly or that lose population.
And it's interesting, looking at the estimate that I saw coming out of census.gov, I learned something. California, of course, is the most populous state. That's going to be pretty blue, we expect. But Texas is the second most populous state, of course. There's almost 29 million people, and Florida third, and New York comes in actually fourth. So you got a couple of states that can or do go red in there.
Oh, that's right. Florida went narrowly for President Trump in the 2016 election, and Florida overtook New York since the 2010 census head count to become the third most populous state. It's slated to gain 2 seats in the 2020 reapportionment, and therefore it will gain more political power in the Congress, and then, of course, have a greater electoral vote allocation for the 2024 and 2028 presidential elections. The same with Texas, slated to gain 3 congressional districts to go from 36 to 39. Texas exploding in population. And President Trump carried that state by about 9 points in 2016. Not a close race, but much smaller margin for a Republican presidential candidate than in previous elections.
Yeah, and there's been a lot of speculation, maybe wish on some people's parts, but a lot of speculation that Texas, if not going blue, could go vaguely purple, that it's sort of been moving in that direction slowly.
I think it very well may. I think what we saw in 2016, that a lot of the urbanite and suburbanite populations in Texas and, the 10 or 12 most populous counties in Texas, which has 254 counties, those 10 or 12 counties account for about 2/3 or even more of the vote in Texas. So it's a huge state geographically, a lot of rural areas, but a lot of the vote is still heavily concentrated in some counties that have been trending Democratic or are not voting as strongly Republican as they used to. I think Texas probably will be closer in 2020 than in 2016.
Yeah, we saw that perhaps a little bit in some of the off-year elections we had in Kentucky, Alabama, places like that even in states that may well go red, that the suburbs and the cities may be a bit more democratically inclined.
That's right. It's those areas, those populous suburban, inner suburban areas with high levels of education that have trended away from the Republicans since Donald Trump became the Republican nominee and was elected president. We see all that in states like Texas, but also in states like Arizona and even Georgia, states that are not voting as strongly Republican as they used to. I think Texas may be on the cusp of competitiveness in the 2020 presidential election, but it did have a very close U.S. Senate race with Ted Cruz barely winning in 2018, but also would would watch Arizona and Georgia, states that are expanding in population as well and diversifying in population.
Yeah, now, to be clear, obviously the House of Representatives allocation is terribly important based on the census, but that's not all that gets allocated according to census. A lot of states, particularly New York, I'll pick one where we are right now, New York is very concerned about the allocation of federal funds because that can go according to how many people they believe there are in the state. And there's a lot of controversy about whether the methodology will reflect the full population.
That's right. And this has been a raging debate for decades about how to appropriately count everyone in the country. I mean, think about what an undertaking that is. It's probably the biggest thing the government does, except in wartime. It's a multi-billion-dollar effort. The Census Bureau thinks there are about 330 million people in the nation. And think about going door to door or mailing people or finding out, counting every single person in the country. And a lot of states, especially states that have large immigrant populations, large non-white populations, including metropolitan New York City, California, are very concerned that the census will undercount their communities, and therefore not only would that lead to undercount their political power in the Congress, but it would also, as you mentioned, deprive them of the billions of dollars in federal funding that is governed by the census data. And that's why the Census Bureau and a lot of state governments are making a major push as the April 1st, 2020 Census Day approaches to encourage people to participate in the census to ensure an accurate count.
Does the internet help or hurt? And by that matter, social media. I mean, this is a different kind of census.
It really is. Social media has come a long way since the 2010 census, certainly. And that's one of the many tools the Census Bureau is using to spread the word about the census, the importance of the census, and to encourage people to participate in it. And they want to try and do some truth squatting in the sense that there's a lot of rumors floating around about is the census data safe? And they're basically saying, federal law prohibits the Census Bureau from sharing personal information from the census. It's just there to get an accurate head count, which would in turn determine the federal funding that states and localities deserve. Yeah, they have to report, as I understand, the census early in the new year, that is 2021. But in the past, there's been some litigation, so it might not even resolve then. Many thanks to Bloomberg BGov's Greg Giroux. Great to have you with us, Greg. It's a new year with new labor laws in California for gig companies like Uber. And Uber isn't taking it lying down. We discuss the merits of its challenge with Professor Stuart Schwab of Cornell Law School. That's coming up next on Balance of Power, and we are on Bloomberg Radio.
This is the Bloomberg Market Minute. U.S. stocks are trading at new highs this year. The Dow Jones Industrial Average up 181 points to 28,719. S&P 500 up 10 points. The Nasdaq climbing 65. Tesla stock is close to its highest level after an analyst at Canaccord Genuity wrote that the trend toward electric vehicles will only accelerate in 2020. Tesla added more than $1 billion to its market value in 2019. But big bankruptcies are up. Data compiled by Bloomberg show 136 big U.S. companies filed for bankruptcy last year. That's the most since 2010. And jobless claims dropped by 2,000 last week to 222,000. The data indicates the labor market remains strong. Donna Wilson, Bloomberg Radio.
Hey, it's me, your cell phone. We need to talk about something serious. I know you love me. I know you like using me wherever you are, but I feel like this isn't working out when you're driving. I know you may think that it's possible to focus both on me and the road, but I just don't feel the same way. I think we should spend time away from each other when you're driving. It's for the best.
Visit StopTextStopWrecks.org. A message brought to you by the National Highway Traffic Safety Administration, Project Yellow Light, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
Give mealtimes a makeover. Give it some gusto.
Give it crispy chili haddock with pak choy noodles or smoky Spanish chicken from just £2.98 per plate. Give it more than 40 delicious recipes to choose from every week and all the ingredients you need for cooking at home. Give your hob a workout. Go on, give it some gusto. Visit gusto.co.uk today and get 50% off your first box. Subscription auto-renews, cancel anytime.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit tunein.com/premium to upgrade.
The puck drops. 12 players face off to win. The suspense is pure torture, but you wouldn't miss this for the world. TuneIn brings you every minute of the NHL season. Listen live to hockey when it matters most on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. TuneIn is remembering the biggest college sports moments of the decade, like this one from 2018, when Alabama's Tua Tagovailoa throws the game-winning touchdown in the national championship against Georgia.
Loads up, looks long, throws, end zone, touchdown! Alabama! Devontae Smith! Touchdown, Alabama! And the Crimson Tide has once again ascended to the top of the college football.
Search college sports on TuneIn to be there for the moments that go down in history.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
Broadcasting live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 1061 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Balance of Power with David Weston.
Coming up on Balance of Power, we talk about the constitutionality of California's new labor law that targets companies like Uber with my colleague, June Grasso. But first, let's get a market check with Charlie Pellet.
Hi, thank you very much, David Weston. And the New Year's Eve party continues on this Back to Work Thursday. First trading day of 2020, we've got the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rallying. Yes, we're looking at records, building on strong gains from many asset classes from last year. The Dow, the S&P, NASDAQ all advancing in the wake of one of the best years for U.S. stocks in the past decade. Here's where we stand. S&P up 9 now at 3240. That's a gain of 0.3%. The Dow up 175 points, up 0.6%. Nasdaq up 64, a gain there of 0.7%. The 10-year up 10/30 seconds with a yield of 1.88%. Lots of economic data today. Jobless claims dropping to a 4-week low. And with that story, here's Bloomberg's Vinny Del Giudice.
The U.S. labor market is tight at the start of the new decade. Jobless claims dropped by 2,000 last week to 222,000. That's the third straight decline. Separately, the staffing firm Challenger Gray & Christmas reports employers announced the fewest job cuts in more than a year in December. Vinny Del Giudice, Bloomberg Radio.
The Bloomberg Comfort Index is up with the economic outlook hitting a 5-month high. A measure of personal finances also improved as the stock market wrapped up its best year since 2013. 10-year up 10/30 seconds, yield 1.88%. Gold up 0.6%. 15.25 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude down 0.3%. $60.89 a barrel. Recapping, S&P up 9 to a record 3240, up 0.3%. Balance of power continues. I'm Charlie Pellet. That's a Bloomberg Business Flash. Here's your host, David Weston.
Thanks so much, Charlie Pellet. California has adopted new labor laws that could require companies like Uber to treat people who work for them as employees rather than independent contractors. And that could trigger all sorts of restrictions and protections. Uber has sued the state in federal district court, claiming the law is unconstitutional, not so much in whom it covers as in whom it doesn't cover. To take us through the challenge, we welcome now my colleague June Grasso and Professor Stuart Schwab of the Cornell Law School. Professor Schwab is an expert in employment law, and also, by the way, he used to be the dean of the Cornell Law School. So welcome, Professor. Great to have you with us. Take us through basically what this law would do and why Uber's so upset about it.
Well, this law, which goes into effect, or I guess went into effect yesterday, 2020, expands on the recent California Supreme Court case, and it basically means a lot more people will be classified as employees rather than independent contractors.
And as I understand it, doesn't directly say they are employees. It just says in order to be a contractor, you have to do work, what I've read here is outside the usual course of a company's business, which would be pretty hard to argue, I guess, if you're an Uber driver.
That's right. It enacts what's called the ABC test, which is just a three-part test, and part B of it is you have to work outside the employer's usual line of business, and so it will be difficult for Uber drivers to say that they're not in Uber's business of driving or providing rides.
So the plaintiffs here are claiming that the law is basically vague and incoherent, and there have been other lawsuits filed by truckers, etc. Does this law take in too many people?
Well, of course, does it take in too many people? In part, that's a political question, and the California legislature sort of hashed this out. I do think traditionally the truckers, many of them would definitely be independent contractors. Under the older test, one of the big parts of it was the worker himself or herself investing a lot of capital. And some of these truckers, have bought a $150,000 truck that they wanted to use as an independent contractor. And so before they would have a good claim. But the real question of this current lawsuit is whether this is unconstitutional. And I must say that I'm pretty skeptical about that. There's no suspect classification here. This is not a race-based classification or a sex-based classification or anything like that. And, the fact that there's a lot of detail here, there's some arbitrariness on which side of the line you're on, is well recognized and can basically be argued with a lot of statutes. So I'm a bit skeptical of the constitutional argument.
So then is it more of a political argument as to what's going to happen with this statute to Uber's, the way Uber operates, to its business model, to Uber and Lyft and Postmates?
Well, what I've read is that Uber continues to say that even under the ABC test, its drivers are independent contractors. This Part B of the test, that they have to be outside the usual line of business, is going to be a difficult argument to make. And so I think in significant part this new statute was targeting Uber drivers, Lyft, those rideshare drivers, and I think it's going to be hard to make a statutory argument that they aren't covered.
So if it's an equal protection argument, is the standard basically whether there's a rational state basis for it as opposed to a compelling interest? I mean, what's the standard that's going to be applied here?
I think that's right. I mean, it's true in every classification. The legislature has to at least have a rational basis, but that's the lowest form of review. And I think among the facts that, lines have to be drawn somewhere is generally considered a rational basis. And if you're operating in the usual line of business, it strikes me as that's rational to call such people employees. I might not well have done it, or what Uber was pushing for in the late stages last fall was, if we pay at least a certain level of wages, a minimum wage, I think the number I saw thrown around was $21 an hour, then maybe they could still be independent contractors. And I would think it's a political matter. You might want some sort of clear-cut line like that. I don't know if $21 is the right amount, or $30 or $50, but that's not the way the legislature went. And again, I think it'd be hard to say they had no rational basis for declaring these people employees.
Are other states considering similar legislation?
Well, Massachusetts actually, about a decade ago, enacted its version of the ABC test, and so it's been operating with that with some time. This is a hot political topic right now, and in one form or another, other states are doing it. And I might mention, of course, this first came out of a California Supreme Court decision last year, the Dynamex case, where they adopted the ABC test, and so other state courts, state Supreme Courts, are also wrestling with this issue. Should they have this new test for a test of who is an employee?
So there's a lot of political consequences for all this, and Uber is not the most popular of companies in various places, including in New York and London and places like that. But is this the sort of thing that we really ought to have a federal rule for? Should we have a different rule in every state about whether Uber can do its business?
Well, that's a big question that goes to federalism and state law. Traditionally, each different statute has its own definition of employee. The federal statutes, like the Fair Labor Standards Act, which sets minimum wages and overtime hours, has its definition of employee. The states, in their state statutes, have their definitions of employee as well. And so, traditionally, we've had all 50 states, as well as the federal government, making their definitions of who's an employee.
Okay, thank you very much.
Whether that should change, maybe it should change. But again, that's also a political question for the Congress.
Well, and what I suggested was whether it should change or not politically, it's going to be awfully hard, I think, for Uber to go into Congress and say, "Please protect us."
Congress.
They aren't the most popular advocate right now. I agree.
Exactly right. Okay, many thanks to my colleague June Grasso, and also to Professor Stuart Schwab of the Cornell Law School. Well, a short time ago, the FDA announced a ban on a range of flavors used for vaping, something that had been foreshadowed by President Trump and by his Secretary of Health and Human Services. To take us through this new ban, we welcome now Jackie Lee from Bloomberg Law. So, Jackie, thanks so much for joining us. It happened while I've been on the air, but as I understand it, it specifies certain flavors are going to be banned. What's the rationale for this?
Right. So it says that all fruity and mint flavors will be banned. Tobacco and menthol will not be banned. And the word ban is actually, the HHS has said explicitly that this isn't a ban. What they're going to do is that they're going to pull those products besides tobacco and menthol off the market. And then if a company can prove through the pre-market application process, which they need to submit by May, if they can prove that their flavors are in fact beneficial to the public health, then the FDA says that it might approve flavors.
So Jackie, was this done through a notice and comment rulemaking proceeding?
Yes, this is being done through regulation, and lawmakers that wanted to see the ban go farther are already reacting. Some Democrats are saying that this isn't going far enough, and that they wish they had seen all flavors banned, including menthol. One thing to note is that this also isn't expected to have a big impact on the vape shops, which is a segment of small businesses that has grown a lot under this administration.
Well, that was exactly my question, because there was talk. Initially, President Trump came out and said, we're going to do away with these things. And it got stalled. And some people said he's worried about the local political ramifications on the local vape shops. Why won't this, okay, don't call it a ban, whatever you call it, why won't that affect those local vape shops?
So this is targeting cartridge-based products, which these are products like Juul, and those products are not sold as often in these vape shops. So that's the idea of why it won't have as large an effect on these smaller individual vape shops.
So are those sold online? I'll confess to you, Jackie, I've never vaped, so I don't know how I get the stuff. But how do you get Juul?
You can buy them online, or you can buy them in stores, but primarily online is a huge driver.
And what was the health concern that underpinned this new rule, this new regulation?
So essentially, lawmakers or regulators rather, are trying to curb the vape use epidemic. Way more middle schoolers and high schoolers are vaping now than they used to, and so this has been a huge health crisis. It's been called an epidemic by various health officials. So that's what they're trying to stop. They're trying to stop kids from wanting to vape and from having access to vapes.
Was there a balancing, as far as you know, by the FDA in this new regulation between, on the one hand, possible health injury to young people who are attracted to these particular attractive flavors, as I understand it, on the one hand, and on the other hand, getting people to stop smoking traditional cigarettes? Because although there's some health risks to vaping, as I understand it, there are really bad health risks to smoking cigarettes.
Right. So that's the delicate balance that the FDA is trying to find here. Getting kids to not vape, to stop vaping, while also protecting the rights of adult vapers who have switched from combustible cigarettes to vapes. There is some evidence that shows that it's a bit safer than smoking cigarettes, but it's worth noting that the FDA hasn't approved vapes as smoking cessation devices.
When does it go in effect, and is there likely to be a legal action that would try to stay it?
It's going to go into effect 30 days. Within 30 days, the FDA will start kind of ramping up its enforcement actions. In terms of potential legal ramifications, we'll have to keep an eye out for that. Juul has said that it supports, it's taken certain flavors like mango off the market already. So Juul has said to some extent that it supports, curbing flavors to some extent. So we'll have to keep an eye out for, what other groups could potentially bring a lawsuit, if any.
Well, that's interesting, Jackie, because if Juul said, okay, we already took some of these flavors off the market, aren't they essentially conceding that they've had some attraction for young people who shouldn't be using this stuff?
So I think the argument that Juul makes is that kids are potentially getting access to their products through illicit means, whether it's through, friends or family buying them for them. They hold that they have very strict age verification requirements for when you have to purchase one of their products. So their whole argument is that this is an illicit vape market, that's how kids are getting access to their products.
And if the focus is young people, which I'm sure it is, there's no doubt about it. We hear about this in high schools all across the country. If that's the focus, is it clear that kids can't go into vape shops and get it? I understand it's a cartridge versus a different approach. I'm not sure exactly what that means, but why won't they just go to a vape shop and get mango or mint or whatever there in a different form?
Right. So, that's all going to be up to those individual shops and how well they enforce their age verification and how, aggressively the FDA follows up on this and enforces this regulation itself.
Okay, Jackie, thank you so much for jumping in on this new FDA regulation involving vaping. That's Jackie Lee from Bloomberg Law. And now for a Bloomberg Business Flash, we're going to turn it over to Charlie Pellet.
All right. I thank you very much, David Weston. Here's what's going on. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ pushing higher. We've got the S&P 500 index beginning the new year with a 9-point advance right now, up 0.3%. Looking at records, now at 3240 on the S&P, with the Dow up 171 points, up 0.6%. And NASDAQ starts out the new year up by 63 points, a gain there of 0.7%. 10 years up 10/30 seconds, yield now 1.88%. Gold up 0.6%, 15.26 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude. It is a down day, dropping 0.2%. WTI now at $60.95. So again, recapping here, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all pushing higher. S&P up 10 points, a gain of 0.3%. Gold one more time up 0.6, 15.26 the ounce. I'm Charlie Pellet. Balance of Power continues. Once again, here's your host, David Weston.
Thank you so much, Charlie Pellet. We're in the Interactive Broker Studio in New York. This is Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. North Korean leader Kim Jong-un promised a Christmas surprise for President Trump. But Christmas came and went without the surprise, and President Trump joked that he was hoping for a vase. And at the same time, saying he was sure that Kim Jong-un would keep his word as part of the deal he signed with him.
He did sign an agreement talking about denuclearization, and that was signed, number one sentence, denuclearization. That was done in Singapore, and I think he's a man of his word, so we're going to find out, but I think he's a man of his word.
But then on New Year's, Kim Jong-un got more specific, saying his country had developed what he called a, quote, new strategic weapon, and that he'd be testing that new weapon in the near future to punish the United States, as he put it, for the pain it has caused his people. To discuss this latest North Korean threat, we welcome now Isaac Stonefish. He is Senior Fellow at the Asia Society Center on U.S.-China Relations. So thank you so much, Isaac, for being with us today. What do we make of this? I've seen some experts say they expect some test in the reasonably near future of something, whatever it is.
Certainly possible that this will be an actual weapon. Kim Jong-un does sometimes have a way with words, and it could be a metaphorical weapon, something about the greatness of the Korean people. But this does show, if we needed more proof, that Kim Jong-un is not someone who keeps his word and not someone who can be trusted. And on the one hand, it's great that Trump communicated the sense of willingness to, lure Kim in from out of the cold, but it's just kind of a silly thing to believe that Kim Jong-un is a trustworthy leader.
Yeah, so the ultimate question, I suppose, at least for me, is if there is some new weapon, is it going to be nuclear? Because since President Trump really started the engagement with Kim Jong-un, I don't believe there's been any test of nuclear weapons. We've had ICBMs, we've had missile tests, we haven't had any nuclear weapons. Is that a, forgive the expression, red line?
I think a testing of a nuclear weapon, especially if it's done in the atmosphere, would be very angering, not only to the United States, but also to China and Russia, which have been having relatively good relations with North Korea right now. I think the issue is that Pyongyang has shown that it has the capability of not only doing some damage to the continental United States, but absolutely decimating Seoul with its stockpiles of biological, chemical, and conventional weaponry. So the denuclearization piece doesn't really feel like the strategy that's going to work. There's got to be some way to convince or remove the weapons that North Korea already has, regardless of what they might be testing in the future.
So there was a day that it was always through China that we went to try to go to North Korea. What is China's position at this point on something like a new strategic weapon? Are they worried about this?
I don't think so. It seems like Beijing is pretty gleeful towards what's been happening with the U.S. and North Korea because it's a big distraction for the United States, and it's something that the U.S. has to manage with a lot of its diplomatic bandwidth as opposed to China. China also has a lot to fear from North Korea, but it's less about nuclear weapons. It's more about instability flooding the northeast provinces that border North Korea with hundreds of thousands of starving refugees, or the possibility that these stockpiles of weapons get in the hands of Tibetan or Uyghurs who are very upset with the way they're treated in China. So I think the fact that Kim Jong-un and Trump are having these conversations as opposed to Xi and Kim Jong-un is a really good thing for China.
That might be good for China, but what about Japan and South Korea? I mean, China may not be too worried about this, but Japan and South Korea are a lot closer to Pyongyang than either China or, for that matter, Washington.
Certainly. I think Japan is the big loser in all of this. South Korea, for those in South Korea who dream of regional greatness, reunifying with North Korea is the only way for that to happen, both for territorial reasons and for strategic reasons and economic reasons. If they do reunify, then companies from Seoul can send goods overland to Europe. For Japan, it's really just how do they minimize this threat? The one negative on this for China is that when the U.S. and South Korea and Japan, especially the U.S. and South Korea, when they do military exercises, when they say, oh, yeah, we have troops in the region because of North Korea, a lot of that is a wink, wink, nudge, nudge. The troops are actually there for China, but North Korea is a very convenient excuse.
And what about the leadership in South Korea? I mean, they've really bet the farm to some extent on this really rapprochement, if I put it that, with North Korea. Is that working out for them or not?
You know, it doesn't really seem to be, and I think we can expect before the American election for the North Koreans to raise their hands and say, hey, don't forget about us, and I think they'll probably do the same thing before the South Korean election.
Well, this is something I think may be underestimated by some people in the United States and the West, perhaps, the extent to which the leadership of North Korea, this goes back before Kim Jong-un, just doesn't like to be ignored.
Exactly. They punch so above their weight considering how desperately poor the country is, and the North Korean leaders have done such an excellent job of mortgaging their own people's present and future in exchange for international attention and international renown and notoriety.
As far as we know, Isaac, and you would know it far better than I, are there active movements afoot among the Trump administration to get back together and get back to the negotiating table with North Korea?
That's such an important question. It certainly seems like people in the Trump administration are pushing for that, especially the Deputy Secretary of State. We saw some remarks from Bolton, who's now, since leaving as National Security Advisor, criticizing the Trump administration's policies from the outside. But I think the Trump administration would love to have a major foreign policy win, and Trump seems to think that he can convince Kim Jong-un by sheer dint of his charisma and his force of personality to come to the table and to do some sort of superficial change, at least that holds until after November 2020, so that they have a boon for the election.
And if we're looking for that, I suspect that one place we might want to keep our eye on is Mike Pompeo, the Secretary of State's travel itinerary. Because as I recall, last time, President Trump used him as sort of a secret emissary to sneak into Pyongyang to have some discussions before President Trump met with the leader.
I think that's a really good point. It's certainly possible that he'll disappear for a few days, or he'll do what Kissinger did in the early 70s and feign a stomach bug, and then a few weeks later, a few months later, we'll learn that he was actually meeting with Kim Jong-un in Pyongyang.
Yeah, it's fascinating. I'm sure that Mike Pompeo would be delighted to be compared with Henry Kissinger and opening up China.
Sure,
but it may be right. It may be fair. I won't put it past him by any means. Okay, many thanks now to Isaac Stonefish of the Asia Society. Isaac, it's always great to have you with us. And it's also great to have Jason Kelly with us, back on the East Coast.
Back on the East Coast.
Back in the cold.
To see you. Yeah,
San Francisco.
It's not nearly as nice as it is in San Francisco right now.
Rub it in. Some of us didn't get to taste that sunshine out there. So what have you got coming up on Bloomberg Business Week today?
Well, new year, new markets for sure.
New program. Don't you have 4 hours? Count them 4?
4 hours starting on Monday.
You can never get enough of Jason Kelly and Carol Messer.
And we're going to be on YouTube as well. So,
wow.
Yeah, great things happening. Today, Taylor Riggs is going to be back with me. We're going to be talking a little bit about some actual consensus around investing here in 2020. It's not going to be as good as 2019. Sorry.
What?
I know.
I was expecting 30%.
I know. Just up and up and up. Also, checking in on your world, what's going on down in Washington with this impeachment stalemate. Can you call it that?
Well, it's fascinating. It's a something. I mean, Nancy Pelosi, Speaker of the House, says, I'm not going to send over the articles. And now we have Mitch McConnell, the majority leader. They've got a pro forma session tomorrow. He's going to go to the floor and make a statement about the impeachment. What's he going to say?
Right.
What's that going to do?
Because he doesn't actually have the stuff.
No,
right?
No, he doesn't.
Yeah.
I mean, it's fascinating.
I'm using technical terms here, the stuff.
It's a big stalemate. But in fairness, the Democrats have 2 Republican senators now. They're saying we're not very happy.
Yeah, exactly. So a lot to catch up on that. And finally, early because some of us did get back from vacation. We're going to talk about where you should be going in 2020. 24 places you should be looking at. So
I hope it's warm.
A lot of it's warm.
That's looking forward to Bloomberg Business Week. That does it today for Balance of Power. I'm David Weston. Thank you for joining us on Bloomberg Radio.
We did. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen and favorite ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow
Bayless.
and TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
.com on the Bloomberg Business app and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio. This is Bloomberg Business Week. Insight from the reporters and editors who bring you America's most trusted business magazine. Plus, global business, finance, and tech news as it happens. Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
Live from the Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio here in New York City, back in New York City, at least I am. I'm Jason Kelly. Taylor Riggs, she's back in San Francisco where I was, but happy to have you down the line, as they say, Tay.
It's great to be here. Another day, like you said, another start to the year, another start to the trading markets, and it looks like more record highs from what I can see.
It certainly appears that way. More green on the screen to kick off the new year. Happy New Year, everyone. Let's get a take on what those stocks are doing across the major indices. For that, we go to Charlie Paul.
All right,
Charlie.
Thank you very much. And again, Happy New Year to you and all our listeners. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all pushing higher, as Taylor mentioned. Yes, we're looking at records. Right now, we have got the S&P 500 index up by 9. That is a gain of just about 0.3%. Dow Industrials pushing higher by 170 points, up by about 0.6%. And the NASDAQ Composite Index up 66. That is a gain of just about 0.7%. Couple of economic data points to mention. Jobless claims down by 2,000 last week to 222,000. Third straight decline. And the Bloomberg Consumer Comfort Index up with an economic economic outlook hitting a 5-month high last week. A measure of personal finances also improved as the stock market wrapped up its best year since 2013. So again, recapping, stocks are pushing higher. S&P right now up by 10 points. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Charlie, thank you so much. You are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly in New York City in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Taylor Riggs out in the 960 studio in San Francisco. So, Taylor, there seems to be a little bit of consensus, at least according to some of our colleagues here, about what folks are expecting in 2020. We're going to bring you that story. What do you expect?
Yeah, I'm just taking a look at markets as we have seen in terms of, how much of this political risk can really offset what seem to be improving fundamentals. Jason, we're getting earnings season in just a few weeks.
Yeah.
That's really going to kick things off, bring us back to fundamentals here and really sort of refocus on what companies can do well, what companies can't. I'm taking a look quickly here just at earnings per share growth for the fourth quarter, which is what we'll be discussing in those January earnings. Looks like a decline, but there are some winners and gainers amongst the sectors.
All right, we're going to get much more into that. Also, you mentioned political risk. We're going to talk about the latest and greatest as it relates to impeachment, this stalemate of sorts that's happening down in Washington. And also, Taylor, you're going to want to be tuned in to this. Where to travel in 2020? You've got some wanderlust, right?
Oh, I'm obsessed with traveling. It's all I can try to do in my free time. So can't wait to hear where perhaps the new hot spots are, where we should be going on all those vacation days we get, Jason.
Exactly. There you go. Nikki Eckstein is going to be along to share that with us. But for now, let's set the business week agenda. The team assembled here in New York, Vincent Signorella, global macro strategist for Bloomberg. He's in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio, as is Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg, author of the Chart and Stock of the Day. Happy New Year to you both. Dave, I want to start with you. What is the one thing on this first trading day of 2020 that people need to be watching?
Boy, I tell you, it's sort of a continuation of what we saw last year, really. I mean, you look at what's doing especially well in the S&P 500, you see advanced micro devices with the biggest gain on the day. And guess what? It had the biggest gain in 2019, the year. I mean, it was up 148%, and it's now up more than 5.5% today. And you go down the line, and you see, ship-related companies doing well, Western Digital, Xilinx, Micron Technology, and so on. And then on the other side of the coin, well, you see Gap and Kohl's down. They both took hits last year, and they're taking more hits today. So, it's not like the changing of the calendar has really changed the character of the market all that much.
Vince, I want to bring you in here. It is Vince Signorella, global macro strategist at Bloomberg News, and also pretty much a former trader, which is why we like to get
Pretty much.
Some would say. You have such a good pulse on the markets, and I want you to clarify something. For me, I keep hearing calls that we're at peak dollar, but copper's going higher, but gold's going higher. How did you fold in dollar dynamics with some other of the commodities, and then folding that into the equity markets in terms of sentiment and where we are?
I'm glad you asked that question, because I'm going to do this on TV tomorrow and do a blog post on this tomorrow. What the calls up for the dollar are, I think, wrong. And the reason why is it's not a real dollar story. So you have two main indexes that track the dollar, the Bloomberg Dollar Index and the ICE Dollar Index. And by the way, this is coming from the co-inventor of the Wall Street Journal Dollar Index, which was the first index that was redone in over 40 years. The Bloomberg Dollar Index measures a much broader swath of currencies. It takes into account emerging markets. I expect that index in 2020 to actually fall. I think the dollar will not do so well against EM. It will not do so well against Asian currencies. But on the other hand, the ICE dollar index stands a reason to actually either go up or trade sideways, because 57% of it is the euro, and I think Europe is going to be in 2020, given the trade situation with both the United States and China, in particular over the Huawei issue. So if I had to put on a trade, I would basically be buying the Dixie and selling the Bloomberg dollar index and seeing that ratio come closer together.
And so does that affect at all how you think about a more vanilla sort of equity portfolio? Does that play through to any of how you think there?
Well, I think we're going to see the big story, I think, in 2020 is going to be supply chain management, both with corporations in China and the United States, and as well as companies around the rest of the world. I think you'll see China, they've already begun to do trade deals with Brazil and Argentina for agriculture. They'll probably look to Mexico for more pork. They're a big exporter. And they'll look to the rest of Asia. They've signed this trade pact with 14 countries that make up some 30% of global GDP growth. So that's where that sort of equity story I see as improving. I think the U.S. probably go up, but much, much less than. We're not going to see the gains we saw in 2019. And I think Europe and the UK are places where I wouldn't want to be.
You know, Dave, I'm hearing some little hints and tidbits of income statement analysis from Vince. I want to fold this back over into your world of earnings season. I wonder if it's too early to start talking about that. I know within the tech land, we're really waiting in just a few weeks to really get some numbers from big tech. How does earnings season look? How is it set to shape up here?
We'll see banks next week, right, Dave?
More
Late
like
next
2
week?
weeks.
Oh, 2 weeks. Got it.
We're about 2 weeks out, and that really is sort of the kickoff of earnings season, especially with the fourth quarter numbers. And, you know, as Taylor mentioned earlier, analysts expecting a decline in S&P 500 profit, and maybe 1.2%. And here's the thing, though. I mean, you know, I just keep going back to this. You look at the quarterly estimates for this year, and you see what they would call sequential improvement. The first quarter supposed to come back to growth, second quarter up from the first, third quarter up from the second. And by the time you get to the fourth quarter, you're talking about 13% plus earnings growth if you buy what analysts are saying about individual companies. And we put that all together, and that's where we come up with the figures that we track. So, you know, there's a lot that companies have to deliver. And let's not forget last year, they couldn't deliver much in the way of earnings growth. So the gains you got in stocks, basically prices going higher.
Right, absolutely. Prices certainly went higher in 2019. We know that to be true. Question becomes, can they sustain that for 2020? Gentlemen, thank you both so much. Dave Wilson, stocks editor for Bloomberg. You'll be back later with your chart and stock of the day. Vince Signorella, global macro strategist. Always appreciate some time with you. Let's do the Bloomberg Markets Bite of the Day. Taylor, it's one number that tells us a lot. Today's number 32. According to Forbes, with the new year upon us comes the annual reveal of the highest paid state employees across the nation. And guess what? College football and basketball coaches dominated the list. In 32 states, the highest paid public employee was a college football coach. In 8 others, it was a college basketball coach. The 10 states with someone other than a college coach as their highest salaried employee were Delaware, Vermont, Maine, New Hampshire, Massachusetts, New York, Montana, North Dakota, Alaska, and Hawaii. Where I come from down south, it's all football coaches, Taylor.
Yeah, apparently. I wish we'd get some teachers in there.
Yeah, I'm not sure that's going to happen anytime soon, probably in our lifetime. But here's hoping. Jason Kelly, Taylor Riggs, here with you on a Thursday afternoon, the first trading day of 2020. Let's get to Bob Moon. He's got world national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Happy New Year, sir. Welcome back. A clear leader may be emerging in the Democratic presidential fundraising race. Bloomberg's Nathan Hager reports from Washington.
Not everyone's reported yet, but so far, Bernie Sanders is leading the pack, surging in the fourth quarter with a $34.5 million haul. That's followed by Pete Buttigieg at $24.7 million and Andrew Yang with $16.5 million in the final 3 months of 2019. Brown University's Wendy Schiller tells Bloomberg Sanders may be sealing up the progressive vote.
What it's done is really put Sanders back ahead of Warren. Warren stumbled badly, I think, on Medicare for All and hasn't quite recovered. And now we're seeing in fundraising numbers numbers potentially that she has not recovered.
In Washington, Nathan Hager, Bloomberg Radio.
Initially, President Trump talked about banning all vaping flavors, including menthol, from all types of e-cigarettes. Today, a significant retreat. Menthol will be exempted, and a ban on candy, mint, and dessert flavors will only apply to small cartridge-based vaping pods. Large tank-based vaping devices catering to adults won't be affected. So, your New Year's resolutions include a vow to lose weight, and maybe you're assuming that drinking a diet soft drink is going to help. After all, isn't that what the TV commercials say?
But I want something sweet without all the calories.
Did someone ask for the sweet, no-cal sweetness of Diet Dr. Pepper?
A federal appeals court has ruled that Dr. Pepper did not deceive consumers into thinking that including diet in the name amounts to a promise of weight loss. A California woman had filed suit alleging fraud. The Ninth U.S. Circuit Court of Appeals rejected that claim. The makers of Diet Coke are said to be watching carefully. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
Financial leaders enjoy talking with Tom Keene and Jonathan Farrell.
What was it like having the giant darken the door every once in a while?
Experts appreciate it when what they have to say is understood.
Do you think that we might have seen a cyclical peak in the labour market?
It's the same reason we're recommending Bloomberg Surveillance to you.
Everything you thought would happen is happening.
Weekday mornings at 7 Eastern on Bloomberg Radio, the Bloomberg Business app, and BloombergRadio.com. Bloomberg, the world is listening.
I'm a 40-year-old man that walked in there to get his high school diploma. It was very hard for me, but Miss Araceli, she gave me direction.
At age 47, Marco finished his high school diploma.
50% of getting your high school diploma is walking through those doors. The other 50% is doing the work.
No one gets a diploma alone. If you're thinking of finishing your high school diploma, you have help. Find free adult education classes near you at finishyourdiploma.org. That's finishyourdiploma.org. Brought to you by the Dollar General Literacy Foundation and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions.
You're fierce. You take care of business and don't hold back. Taking care of your health shouldn't be any different. You know when something's off. Don't ignore symptoms like fatigue, joint pain, and rashes. Listen to your body. It could be lupus. We're here to help you take control. Learn how at BeFierceTakeControl.org. Brought to you by the Lupus Foundation of America and the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention.
The market's in focus.
At Wix, we'll create your dream kitchen from design to show-off ready and take care of everything. And now, get up to 50% off showroom kitchen units. Book your free design appointment today. Cure your house embarrassment with Wix. Selected ranges excluded. See wix.co.uk.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
Upgrade to TuneIn Premium and get over 45 commercial-free music stations. You'll also get live commercial-free news, plus live play-by-play games from NFL, MLB, NBA, and NHL. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Cutting for the net, scores! On the goal line, Marshawn scores!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
And tucks it home!
And with this team, it's really fun to be a part of a team like that.
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium. From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. with live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip Bayless.
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slammed it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds, or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
At Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. Stocks moving higher on the first trading day of 2020. Technology leading the advance. Right now we've got the NASDAQ Composite Index trading at 9,049. It is up 76 points, up 0.9%. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing to records. S&P up 11. That's a gain of 0.4%. 3242, and the Dow higher by 178 points, up 0.6%. 28,717 on the Dow. The 10-year up 11/32, yield now 1.87%. Gold up 0.6%, 15.26 the ounce. Sam West Texas Intermediate crude oil up just about 0.2%, 61.16 a barrel. Recapping, stocks higher. S&P up another 12 points now, up 0.4% at 3242. I'm Charlie Pelleton. That is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie. And I'm Taylor Riggs here with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
All right, so what do we make of 2020 so far? Seems great, but maybe a different sort of year to come. That's at least the consensus that seems to be reached by a whole bunch of people on Wall Street. Let's break it down with Luke Kawa. He is cross-asset reporter for Bloomberg, here with us in New York to talk about the most read story on the Bloomberg, not surprisingly. It's comprehensive. Taylor, you can sort of lose yourself in this story if you want to, searching by key themes, asset classes, institutions, all of it. Luke, great to have you with Taylor and myself. So give us the overview here. A lot of consensus, it feels like.
First of all, I have to give it up to Sam Potter, my colleague in London, who's actually the gentleman who compiled this. Hopefully he's in bed by now. Hard worker, up early. So Just to kind of set the stage here, it's amazing how similar a lot of the themes are. One thing, and this is what John Farrow this morning led off his show with, cautious optimism is essentially the order of the day. But the idea that you can't, or it will be very difficult to repeat the kind of eye-popping performance across major asset classes in 2019, whether to the same magnitude or the same breadth, that's what Wall Street is casting a lot of doubt on. But the general outlook here is for stocks to go up in the U.S., probably more in the rest of the world. For credit, you're more clipping coupons than getting the kind of huge spread rally combined with the big duration kicker you got in some parts of the bond universe last year. Another year of calling for a softer dollar, so that's also in the cards. And the 10-year Treasury yield, after a wild year in which it rallied quite magnificently, the 10-year bond, it's expected to be rather range-bound, maybe edge up to about 2%, but the Treasury market, in particular the 10-year yield, should not be making nearly as many headlines this year as it was last year if Wall Street's right.
Luke, fascinating report, and I love how you have tied in equities, bonds, currencies, commodities, all the works. One thing that you ended on that caught my attention was calls for the 10-year, and I scrolled down through the report and we get to another thing that's talking about negative rates, and you know this story. Negative yielding debt shrunk. Really, it's now only $11 trillion. It used to be $17 trillion. What are the expectations for negative rates, negative yielding debt, as we've come off those highs a bit?
Well, part of the kind of convergence trade that was in effect for, a bit or not too much, but enough of 2019, at least in the bond market, kind of involved just what we were talking about from its peak of nearly, 17 trillion or 15 trillion, somewhere in that neighborhood, that number getting a lot smaller as we approached year end. And with the 10-year Treasury expected to stay relatively sticky, the way convergence is expected to happen is to drag more and more out of that debt, but maybe not too much, but more and more out of negative territory. And there's another story this morning out from one of my colleagues in London just talking about the amount of government debt that's going to need to be rolled over this year. Not a crazy amount, but just the idea that the data this morning don't necessarily support it, especially in Europe, but just the idea that as the global economy does bottom out, convergence will mean more and more economies and more sovereign debt getting to a place where holding to maturity will actually yield you something positive.
And so, Luke, when you look across all of this and think about the R word, recession, it was something that, if you go back a few months, September, the drumbeat was getting a little bit louder. What's the consensus, if there is any, about the potential for recession in 2020?
So, if you had done this survey in August, if we had the some kind of weird calendar, I bet you would have got a lot of different responses on that front right now. And you can see this all across, different bits of markets, whether you're looking at equities, whether you're looking at, the potential for options that pay out if there's deflation. We've really priced out the tail risk of recession, and that's warranted, and that's thoroughly expounded upon in this report. In everyone's base case, it's essentially growth will be better than it was in 2019, but not as good as it was in 2017 or 2018. So just this idea that growth is slow, growth will be in or around 2%. So not a recession, but not something to essentially wave flags about.
And then, Luke, tie in fiscal policy with monetary policy. What takes more center stage?
Well, in general, as you see these outlooks, both U.S. election risk, which I think ties more into the fiscal policy side, or at least the fiscal outlook thing. That's always, if you go through these, it's at least a cursory mention in everyone's report. This is a year in which monetary policy is expected to, especially in developed markets, really go to the wayside. It's not supposed to be interesting to any respect. And in fact, if you look at the European Central Bank, it'll be most noteworthy for what monetary policymakers are able to kind of convince or cajole fiscal policymakers into doing in the year ahead. However, there isn't necessarily a ton of optimism that baton pass is really going to go off well. So in terms of the stimulus or the impulse we're getting from easier monetary or fiscal policy, it's more the lagged effect. It's said that monetary policy works with these long and variable lags. It's more that's expected to continue to be helping out as we go through 2020.
All right, Luke Cowell, we're going to leave it there. Thank you so much, cross-asset reporter, part of a massive team that put together this most read story on the Bloomberg today. And I do encourage you to go check it out because you can, as I said, sort of search by themes, asset class, institution, and get a really holistic sense of how Wall Street is feeling about all the major issues as we head into what is bound to be a very interesting year. Jason Kelly here in New York City, Taylor Riggs out in San Francisco. And coming up, we're going to check in with Eben Novy-Williams, a major passing in the world of sports. He's going to tell us about the legacy of David Stern, all that he meant, not just for the NBA, but for the global economy in many ways. Player empowerment really changed the way we think about that sport and sports in general. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Taylor Riggs right here on Bloomberg Radio.
This is a Bloomberg Market Minute. It's a bullish start to the new year for stocks. Prices are on track to close at fresh all-time highs. The Dow Jones Industrial Average is up 180, the S&P 500 up 11, the Nasdaq Composite is up 74. Tesla is up more than 2.5%. An analyst at Canaccord Genuity says the trend toward electric vehicles will only accelerate this year. Tesla added more than $1 billion to its market value in 2019. A group of Amazon employees who want it to fight climate change say some have been threatened with termination if they speak out about Amazon's internal affairs. Amazon Employees for Climate Justice says 4 employees have been told they are violating company policy. Carlos Ghosn plans to hold a news conference in Beirut in a week, according to a Lebanese newspaper. The former Nissan chief is in Lebanon after his escape from Japan, where he'd been arrested and detained on charges of financial misconduct. Larry Kofsky, Bloomberg Radio.
Hi, I'm your host, Smokey Colbert, filling in for Smokey because after 75 years of...
Only you can prevent wildfires.
Turns out there's much more to say. Nearly 90% of wildfires are caused by us humans being careless, dumping our used barbecue coals willy-nilly. Guess the song was wrong. We did start the fire. That's why I respect Mother Nature and her trees, whether coniferous or new car scented. Brought to you by the U.S. Forest Service, your state forester, and the Ad Council.
In-depth analysis, concise reporting, need-to-know global business news. Around the world and across the markets, Bloomberg connects the dots for decision makers. Stay on top of today's headlines. Follow big breakthroughs in tech. Understand the latest political issues. See how the world's wealthiest are spending their money. Track what's happening in the markets, and much more. Subscribe today to Bloomberg, the global standard for business reporting. Get it all at Bloomberg.com/subscriptions. What if you could keep the...
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in. Touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
Along the goal line, scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
Hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
And a move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Get your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards at the goal line. It's intercepted.
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown.
Search NFL today.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Introducing a new podcast, ESPN Daily. When you want to go beyond your feed, when you want to get inside the score, when you want to get behind the highlight, there's ESPN Daily. Go deeper into the stories of the moment. Get the exclusive access and insider perspective that only ESPN can give you. ESPN Daily, hosted by me, Mina Kimes. Listen now to ESPN Daily on TuneIn.
Want to hear about the latest and greatest things to listen to on TuneIn? For reminders of the biggest live sports games, debates, and breaking news stories, follow @TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to stay connected with the audio that matters to you.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Bloomberg Interactive Brokers Studio in New York. Bloomberg 1130 to Washington, D.C. Bloomberg 99.1 to Boston. Bloomberg 106.1 to San Francisco. Bloomberg 960 to the country. Sirius XM Channel 119 and around the globe. The Bloomberg Business app and BloombergRadio.com. This is Bloomberg Business Week.
Coming up, we're going to talk about the life and legacy of David Stern, a giant in the world of sports, and certainly put the NBA on a completely different path, making it one of the most important leagues, certainly in the world. But first, let's get to Charlie Pellet. He's got an update on the trade. Hey, Charlie.
Well, hello there, and we are looking at stocks at or near their best level of the day right now. 201-point jump in the Dow Jones Industrial Average, up 0.7%. S&P 500 index up 14 now. That's a gain of 0.4%. NASDAQ up 84, higher by just about 0.9%. So U.S. stocks starting the year on the front foot, building on strong gains for many asset classes last year as investors cheer the latest policy move by China's central bank to support its economy. The 10-year up 10/32 yield now 1.88%. Gold up 0.6%, 15.25 the ounce, and West Texas Intermediate crude oil up 0.2%, 61.19 a barrel. So stocks start the year higher. In fact, looking at records, Robert Albertson is chief strategist at Sandler O'Neill and Partners, and on Bloomberg Television this morning, he told us there is reason to be cautious.
At some point this year, things are going to get very sluggish, and you can't time when to get in and out of the market. You have to take a view on it and stick with it. So I would say it's time to pull out some of the equity position, go to safer assets, go to more global investments that are not as hindered by what's going on here in the United States.
And again, we've got the 10-year yielding 1.88%. Advanced Micro Devices shares rallying with the stock hitting an intraday record, chipmakers' first such milestone in nearly 2 decades. AMD shares up now by 6.4%. Recapping, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all advancing. S&P up 14, up 0.4%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie. And I'm Taylor Riggs here with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
All right. The passing of David Stern, longtime commissioner of the NBA, has led to an unbelievable outpouring of grief, but also some remembrances of really a truly remarkable life and an impact that few have had on the world of sports. Eben Novy-Williams, sports business reporter, podcast host extraordinaire, so many more things here at Bloomberg, joins me in our Bloomberg Interactive Brokers studio. I mean, what an amazing guy in a lot of ways.
Yeah, we had David on the podcast a little bit less than a year ago, actually, and he came on, and I think we didn't have to say a single word, right?
Yeah.
He just kind of rattled off stories in Thimphu, Bhutan, when he landed and found, monks up there that were watching League Pass. They were watching Kobe Bryant on their computers, which was one of the first times he realized that, hey, we have an international audience and we could be doing more to grow basketball overseas. I mean, he had an impact across the globe on the sports world for sure.
And I have to say, one of the things that I had candidly forgotten about, I did not realize he was the commissioner for 30 years. I mean, and when you think about where the NBA was in the mid 80s and where it is today, I cannot think of another business outside of like Apple that has, sort of grown and influenced in the way that league has.
It's a great point. I mean, when he took over in 1984, I believe the NBA had just recently stopped having its finals on tape delay, right? So It wasn't even a TV product at all. There were 24 teams. It was viewed largely as a circus. He kind of whipped the whole thing into shape, right? And one of his biggest initiatives when he was younger, fixing the image of the game and the players, right? I mean, at a time, a lot of that's racial, but the NBA, its players, was not a commercial entity in any capacity, right? And he, at times drew hard lines. That certainly the dress code that he put together is probably the most, visible part of this, but, he brought in stricter drug testing. He imposed very harsh penalties for a player that knelt during the national anthem, or players that went into the stands to fight, or remember when Latrell Sprewell choked his coach. He was a disciplinarian, but all of that served to, I think, change the way that America, and especially corporate America, interacted with the NBA. And that's the reason why this is a $9 billion enterprise now.
And even, some of the statistics are stunning. When you look at NBA revenue, bringing it from $118 million to $5.5 billion in 2014, the year he retired. What did he do for the franchise, not only in terms of revenue, but geographic expansion and really making this a global sport? Yeah, so expansion across the U.S. obviously, happened, pretty quickly under his tenure, but globally, I think is the bigger thing there, right? Back in the 80s, he cut the first NBA deal with CCTV. They were shipping VHS tapes overseas so that highlight packages could be cut and shown to the Chinese audience. Flash forward 30 years, the NBA has $1 billion business in China, right? Which was in the news this year for another reason. But the reason why the NBA is the most popular foreign league in China, possibly the most popular sport outside of soccer around the globe, a lot of that has to do with the fact that long before the NFL was saying, man, we have to have a presence overseas, the NBA was already doing the legwork to make that happen.
Help us understand, and you alluded to this earlier, Eben, sort of the player empowerment piece of this, because what you have seen, and you and I have talked about this a lot over the last couple of years, this notion that NBA players have transcended in a way that certainly other major sport athletes aren't anymore or never were. Did he play a role in that?
For sure. And it was kind of a confluence of multiple things, right? He had the benefit of very early in his commissionerhood to have a guy named Michael Jordan enter the league, right? Who totally changed the way that athletes merge as businessmen when they're not playing. But yes, part of his, shaping up the image of the league was also helping push a lot of these players outward, right? To corporate America. And then flash forward to that now, and you're right. If you look across the four major leagues, there's no question that NBA players are more famous on average than their counterparts in other leagues. Part of that has to do with the fact that they don't wear helmets, and they walk down the street and you go, oh, I know that. That's Chris Bosh. That's LeBron James. But a large part of that has to do with the fact that from the top down, it was a priority for the NBA, and that's smart business, right? I think he realized very early on that another way to grow the popularity of basketball was to do it on the backs of the players, and not necessarily just the brand of the New York Knicks or the brand of the Washington Wizards.
It was interesting to note, too, in a lot of these tributes, many of which were on Twitter, you look at what Magic Johnson said, you look at what LeBron James said, you looked at what Michael Jordan said. they were very personal tributes in a lot of ways, and sort of pointing out how David Stern was a part of these sort of seminal moments, not just in their careers, but in their lives. You think about what Stern did for Magic Johnson when he came out and said he was HIV positive. Like, really a guy who was just in the center of so much. Evan Novi-Williams, thank you so much. Sports business reporter for Bloomberg, also co-host of the Bloomberg Business of Sports podcast with Michael Barr and Scott Soshnick. Check that out wherever you get your podcasts, and when you're not listening to Bloomberg Business Week. It's a pretty good one. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Taylor Riggs here with you. I'm in New York. She's in San Francisco. Here in New York with me is Bob Moon, and he's got world and national headlines. Hey, Bob.
Jason, the U.S. is seeing a risk of more strikes against American interests in the Middle East by Iran or its proxy forces in the region. Defense Secretary Mark Esper spoke to reporters 2 days after he sent hundreds of paratroopers to Kuwait as a backup force to protect the U.S. Embassy compound in Baghdad. Esper says it's a preemptive action.
Not a show of force. It's a reinforcing capability that we can employ not just in Iraq, but throughout the region.
Esper says the U.S. has indications that more Iranian provocations may be in the offing. U.S. health officials will ban most e-cigarette flavors made for devices popular with underage teenagers, but the plan from the Trump administration includes major exceptions that benefit companies that make and sell e-cigarettes aimed more at adult consumers who use the nicotine-emitting devices. Members of Congress from the New York area are calling for improved security at synagogues after the incident outside New York this weekend when a man entered a rabbi's home during a Hanukkah celebration and stabbed 5 people. Democratic Representative Max Rose says he and other members of the congressional delegation have heard from fearful Jewish constituents in the past few days.
I'm afraid to go outside with my kippah on. I'm afraid to speak Hebrew in public. I'm afraid to go to the synagogue. I'm afraid to congregate with my family for Hanukkah here in New York City.
The congressional delegation wants to improve security at synagogues, mosques, churches, and community centers by applying for more state and federal grant money supporting nonprofit institutions. Global news 24 hours a day, on air and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. Powered by more than 2,700 journalists and analysts in more than 120 countries. I'm Bob Moon.
Asset managers who seize change to launch new strategies, add distribution channels, or exploit new technology to re-engineer the investor experience are often rewarded. However, in an industry paralyzed with complexity, few act with agility or decisively. Few run their businesses strategically, yet the most competitive managers in the market know with the right partner and a flexible operating system, you can. Go boldly toward change with SEI Investment Manager Services.
Determination and operational strength are both essential factors for growth in asset management. I'm Steve Meyer, President and Head of SEI's Investment Manager Services Division. We know that disruptive forces create opportunities around the world. If you see potential in change, our industry specialists will maximize SEI's integrated platform of data and risk management, global investment operations, compliance support, and investor services to position your asset management business for success. Come grow with us.
With SEI Investment Manager Services, you lead the charge in a competitive marketplace. Learn more at SEIC.com/seize change.
Business is constantly evolving. Is your financial printer evolving to keep ahead of the curve? At Command Financial, we are redefining financial printing by providing industry-leading expertise, leveraging technology, and honing processes and best practices. Every day, Command helps SEC registrants, as well as members of their working groups, including securities attorneys and investment bankers, prepare, file, and disseminate regulatory and disclosure documents, such as registration statements, M&A documents, and mutual fund prospectuses and reports. Command provides a full range of services to help you effectively complete your deal, meet your disclosure requirements, and achieve your shareholder communications objectives. Visit our website at commandfinancial.com and learn how we're evolving, not only with the times, but also with your business requirements. Command Financial, redefining financial printing.
Are you interested in a challenging...
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
When you're not listening to your team, take it to the end zone, the rim, or the net. Keep up with the biggest moments in sports by following TuneIn on social media.
Block, Cook into the end zone for the touchdown.
From reminders of the live top games to tips of the best sports stations and podcasts.
Welcome to Undisputed. We are live from Los Angeles. I'm Jenny Taft here with Skip
Follow at TuneIn on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram to get the most out of TuneIn.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
You might already know that TuneIn allows you to listen to all the pro sports leagues wherever you go. But did you know TuneIn is also home to the wide world of college sports?
Open three, DeAndre Hunter got it! Handoff Carruthers, big hole right side. He leaps and he surges in, touchdown!
From live college football, basketball, and baseball games to podcasts and coaches shows fueling your love for the game in your school. And the best part is, it's all free. Search college sports to find your team or league. Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? We've got you covered. With TuneIn Premium, you can listen to every NFL game live as it's happening.
LaShawn McCoy has an opening on the right side, punches into the end zone for the touchdown.
Or catch it later on demand.
Offset backs behind Mahomes. The give is to Williams. Starts right, cuts it back to the left, and blows into the end zone for the touchdown.
You call the plays. Follow the NFL anytime, anywhere, all season long with TuneIn Premium. Upgrade today.
You love TuneIn for live breaking news from CNN, MSNBC, Fox, CNBC, and more. But when you can't catch your favorite show as it airs, it might just be a click away as a podcast. Search your favorite news station to explore all the on-demand news shows on TuneIn.
This is not a commercial. This is a reminder. With TuneIn Premium, you could be listening to more music commercial-free. Get over 45 commercial-free music stations. Visit TuneIn.com/premium to upgrade.
Along the goal line, Martin scores and takes it home.
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
A move, and a shot, they score!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
News 24 hours a day at Bloomberg.com, the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. The Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ continuing to advance at or near the best level of the day, building on strong gains for many asset classes in 2019. So far today, the S&P 500 index is up 0.5%, up another 16 points now at 3247. The Dow higher by 234 points, up 0.8%. Best level of the day on the Dow. NASDAQ up 90. That is a gain today. First trading day of the new year. NASDAQ is up by 1%. The 10-year up 10.30 seconds yield 1.88%. Gold up 0.6%, 15.26 the ounce. And West Texas Intermediate crude higher by 0.3%, 61.21 a barrel. So again, recapping an up day on Wall Street with the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all rallying. S&P up 17, a gain of 0.6%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
Thank you, Charlie. And I'm Taylor Riggs here with Jason Kelly, and this is Bloomberg Radio.
All right,
right, so as we get you set for 2020, it's underway, the first trading day. Here we go, folks. Let's understand, and we started this conversation earlier in the hour with our own Luke Kawa. We're going to continue it with Brett Ewing. He is Chief Market Strategist for First Franklin Financial Services, joining us on the phone from Tallahassee, Florida. Brett, great to have you back with us.
Thank you, Jason.
All right, so tee this year up for us, because 2019, unexpectedly in some ways, was, to use a technical term, a heck of a year. Everybody felt great about it. No huge surprises other than a couple blips, at least from an equity perspective. How does 2020 look in comparison from your vantage point?
I'm optimistic on 2020, and I feel that it should be, again, a pretty good year for equities. My theme for 2020 is basically surprises are going to be across the board again, and they will be on the upside.
When we take a look at earnings, which Jason and I have been talking about in the last hour, eagerly awaiting earnings numbers to start trickling out in the next few weeks or so, what sectors do you really like as we sort of focus back on fundamentals?
Yeah, with sectors for 2020, we like the energy, materials, technology, on the healthcare, medical devices specifically, and I also like industrials.
And so when you think about those areas, what are the big risks? I mean, the political risk seems to be something that plays through just about everybody's both best and worst cases. How do you figure it in?
Yeah, so the things that I'm looking at are the two primary concerns I have right here are trade war escalation. Is that going to diminish? And I'm going to take the stance that I believe that the escalation is on a path to dissipate. And I also believe the Federal Reserve and central bankers around the globe are on the right path and stepping to the side. And they're being accommodative as needed.
And so do you buy the idea, Brett, that like central banks become sort of the non-story of 2020? And if that's the case, and Taylor brought this up earlier in the show as well, do we focus more on sort of the fiscal rather than the monetary side? Well,
I would like to think that central bankers could stay out of the limelight. That doesn't often happen, and I think that there could be a chance it's with good intentions that they want to stay on the sideline, but there could be some real wage growth here in 2020, and wage inflation could maybe push up some of the numbers going into the second half of the year that I think the Fed will be taking a look at.
Brett, I really like some of your calls that we've been talking about. You like industrials. You're really looking at materials having a good start to 2020 as commodities start to show some life. I was joking with Jason. I just did a crash course in commodities as I was anchoring a commodity show earlier today. And talk to me about what commodities you really like, because I hear calls for gold set to go to $1,600 an ounce, and yet copper really showing signs of rebounding too. Those two, one being a safe haven, one being a really sort of way to measure economic growth, normally wouldn't coincide together. What do you like about the commodities?
Well, I like the fact that they are a good indicator, and what they're telling me is that there's life in the global economy that's not really being priced in. And those commodities are historically a pretty good leading indicator that more positive days are coming for the global economy. And when you wrap that up with what I said about the central bankers and also about some of the trade, positive movement in the trade wars going on, then I feel that the commodity market is actually pointing that out, that it's given us a sense of solitude that this is going to play out well.
What's your biggest worry? What do you worry most about? And as you talk to your clients, what are they most worried about as we get into 2020?
You know, I would love to see productivity start going back up. It's been tapering off here recently. And you need productivity with the labor market this tight to keep inflation from rearing its head unexpectedly. And so what I would like to see is productivity pick back up. I worry about inflation coming into the picture. I know that people have said there would be inflation for the last 10 years, and it just never shows up. But where we are in this labor market, if you look at the wage growth that we finally received starting in 2018, I think that accelerates in 2020 with this tight labor market. And I really think that could surprise people in the second half of the year. So there's my concern.
Yeah, I want to go international for a bit. You're really liking EM debt here. Do I go dollar denominated or local currency?
Well, I think, a lot of your viewers out there potentially could play that through EM debt mutual fund or ETF, probably dollar denominated. But, we're liking that in the space if you compare that to maybe corporate credit and how crowded those spreads are versus something in the emerging markets. I think there's better value there and a little bit more upside. And I think that's what's important for 2020.
All right, Brett Ewing, thank you so much. Chief Market Strategist for First Franklin Financial Services, joining us on the phone from Tallahassee, Florida. And Taylor, it's interesting on a day like this as we're getting into the trade, but sort of lightly, right? I mean, right. A lot of people, candidly, who are still on vacation. I don't know if it's still like that out in San Francisco, but moving around New York today, it's not quite as busy as you would expect as everything gets kicked off.
Yeah, and I think we can take a look at that by the trading volume. I think Monday will be the real day, of course, as everyone gets back to work. I really liked what Brett had to say there at the end. He was trying to wrap in some credit spreads. Jason, a week ago, we were doing our real yield fixed income show. You're looking at high yield spreads at like 350 basis points, investment grade spreads under 100 basis points. Things are looking really tight from a credit perspective. And Brett said that there are some other opportunities as you take a look at a really tight credit market.
Right. Yeah. Well, and that's certainly something that people are going to be looking pretty closely at, and there's always this question, and I know we talk about it a lot, about the consumer. Again, sort of being out west with you earlier this week, you see a lot of tourism, you see a lot of people spending money. The consumer continues to feel pretty good, and that certainly drove things as we went through 2019, and you do wonder if the consumer continues to sort of carry the proverbial ball as we get deeper into 2020, even with some political headwinds. You're listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Jason Kelly and Taylor Riggs, you're on Bloomberg.
We did all the research.
Pascal gobbles up the rebound and slams it down.
Catch your favorite NBA team right here on TuneIn.
A step back, deep three is up and in.
Search NBA on TuneIn and hear all the action. The NBA lives on TuneIn.
Hello, I'm Nat Coombs from ESPN's The Nat Coombs Show, which admittedly is 1 out of 10 for original podcast name, but 10 out of 10 for NFL chat. Every week, we're dropping 4 episodes with an all-pro lineup of terrific guests, journalists, comedians, players, coaches, you name it, all getting you up to speed with everything gridiron. The Nat Coombs Show, American football, British accent. Add to your favorites and listen on TuneIn.
Are you curious what others are listening to on TuneIn? Head to the trending section under Browse to see the most popular stations and podcasts among TuneIn listeners right now. Check it out. You might just discover something new for yourself.
We can't make traffic move faster during rush hour, but we can help you catch up on the news with TuneIn. With live around-the-clock news from MSNBC.
In the UK, they're significantly worse. When the president gets up to the podium...
CNBC and Fox News Talk.
The Fox News poll sizing up the race for 2020 found that each of the 5 top Democrats...
You can use your stop and go for good by staying in touch with the world. Search news to hear what's happening now.
Want TuneIn to remind you when the big NFL game is about to get underway? Be sure notifications are allowed on your phone and search NFL on the TuneIn app. Find the game you want to hear under events and tap Notify Me. We'll let you know exactly when it's time to listen in for kickoff.
On the goal line, Martin scores! He takes it home!
Hockey fans, the 2019-20 NHL season is here.
Here's Pietrangelo, he scores!
And you can hear the action live on TuneIn Premium.
Gonna move, hit a shot, he scores!
From regular season action to the All-Star Game and through the Stanley Cup in June. Hear the home and away call for every game, for every team live. At home or on the go, never miss a game with the NHL on TuneIn Premium.
Upgrade today.
Hey, NFL fan, can't watch the game? Can't be there? No biggie. With your TuneIn Premium membership, you already have an all-access pass to every team and every game in the league. Amazing, right?
Steps up, floats it towards, at the goal line, it's intercepted!
Listen live as the action unfolds or on demand when you can. Anytime, anywhere, all season long.
Right side, it is caught. It is in for the right side for the touchdown to Keenan.
Search NFL today.
Hours at Bloomberg.com, on the Bloomberg Business app, and on Quick Take by Bloomberg. This is Bloomberg Radio.
From Bloomberg World Headquarters, I'm Charlie Pellet. We move into the final hour of trading on the first trading day of 2020. It is an up day. In fact, the Dow, the S&P, and NASDAQ all trading at or near records. Stocks starting the year on the front foot, building on strong gains for many asset classes in 2019 as investors cheer the latest policy move by China's central bank to support its economy. Here's where we stand. S&P 500 index up 17 points now. 32.47. That's a gain of 0.5%. The Dow Jones Industrial Average rallying 233 points, up 0.8%. NASDAQ on this first trading day of the new year up 91 points at 9,064. NASDAQ is up by 1%. 10-year up 10.30 seconds with a yield now of 1.88%. As for what he's looking for in the new trading year, Brett Ewing is Chief Market Strategist at First Franklin Financial Services. He was our guest moments ago, right here on Bloomberg Business Week.
The things that I'm looking at are the two primary concerns I have right here are trade war escalation. Is that going to diminish? And I'm going to take the stance that I believe that the escalation is on a path to dissipate. And I also believe the Federal Reserve and central bankers around the globe are on the right path and stepping to the side.
Tesla's price target has been raised by more than $100 at Canaccord Genuity, which wrote that the trend toward electric vehicles, quote, will only accelerate in 2020. Tesla shares are up now, higher by 2.84% at $430. Canaccord Genuity, by the way, has a target of $515. That is up from $375. We've got gold up 0.6% right now, $15.26 the ounce. West Texas Intermediate crude up 0.2% at $61.16 a barrel. So again, recapping, stocks trading at records. S&P higher by 17, up 0.5%. The Dow up 0.8%. NASDAQ up now by 1%. I'm Charlie Pellet, and that is a Bloomberg Business Flash.
This is Bloomberg Business Week with Carol Messer and Jason Kelly on Bloomberg Radio.
All right, you are listening to Bloomberg Business Week. Time to do a little Business Week economics. The team back together. Kathleen Hayes, Global Economics and Policy Editor for Bloomberg, and Andrew Husby, U.S. Economist for Bloomberg Economics, here with me in our Bloomberg Interactive Broker studio. Taylor Riggs out in San Francisco, weighing in from the left coast, the west coast, the best coast, however you want to frame it. Kathleen Hayes, former denizen of the west coast that she is. Bring us up to date. What's going on in the bond market?
It's quite a nice little rally today. You know, just when you think this bond market's never going to move, here we've got a rally. Charlie just mentioned the 10-year note, the benchmark up 11.30 seconds, yields at 1.879. Although, you know, it's like the 10-year note has this ankle tether that keeps it right around 189, give or take a few. 30-year bond up though, a 1.125 down, the yield down at 2.337. Now, if you look at the PMI numbers, the Purchasing Managers Indexes for manufacturing out of Europe today, you can say, whoa, they were looking kind of soggy still. They're looking kind of weak. So that could certainly give the bond market a grounds for saying, the Fed doesn't want to move rates this year, fine, but we're still seeing weakness overseas. Overnight, of course, some mixed PMIs out of Asia, some looking, okay, we're still above 50 on manufacturing, still some expansion, Australia and a couple others remaining below 50. And I think it's interesting, too, that the bond markets had this rally today. Of course, we know everything's thin, in spite of the fact that stocks have moved higher. The big things potentially big for the bond market are tomorrow. We get the U.S. Purchasing Managers Index. That's the one you watch, not the market PMI for the U.S. And we'll get the minutes from the last meeting. And in particular, I don't think people are expecting much clarity from the Fed because we've got the clarity. The majority don't see anything happening in rates this year. But what about the repo market? What are they going to do there?
We couldn't go another segment without talking about the repo market, could we, Jason?
Even without Alex Harris, repo.
It's more about the repo market than I have in my 6 months out here in San Francisco. So let me pull in Andrew Husby to save me, U.S. economist over at Bloomberg Economics. Andrew, you were hearing Kathleen talk a little bit about the bond market, talking about some of the PMIs that we're looking at for tomorrow out of the U.S. What are you hearing in terms of the short-term outlook, at least in some of the U.S. economic data?
Yeah, I think right now the focus on manufacturing is the right one. A lot of the news flow has been positive in recent months, but we really haven't seen a clearer inflection point in the actual manufacturing numbers. As we just heard, the numbers in Asia were a bit mixed. Europe is still, mired in various levels of contraction. So the issue there is how much of a game changer this recent trade news was, and we didn't think it was. We think this pattern of slower growth in manufacturing continues into the first quarter. There are a number of special factors, including the Boeing production halt, and then there's the usual first quarter jitters or pothole that the U.S. economy has tended to go through in recent years. So we think that the outlook doesn't change right away. We think there's certainly scope for green shoots in the spring, but winter is first.
And so, Kathleen. Excuse me. You mentioned the central banks, and earlier we had a guest, Brett Ewing, talk about how central bankers, they want to stay on the sidelines in 2020 for a lot of reasons, some of which are owing to the election year, but they might not be able to help themselves. How do you react to something like that? What do you think central banks will do through 2020?
They'll do what they have to do, and particularly overseas. I don't think the Japanese or the Europeans care anything about our election. And in fact, when I interviewed Rob Kaplan, president of the Dallas Fed, who becomes a voter this year, I specifically asked him, because he's penciled in nothing for this year. He thinks manufacturing is going to remain weak, right? And that the trade war not getting some resolution maybe is the downside risk. But classic Fed view right now, consumer is going to hold up. So I said, well, gosh, wouldn't that be hard, in an election year if you had to, what if things are picking up? So it won't affect what I do. And I really believe that. I think everybody who watches the Fed gets far too caught up in, I've watched the Fed long enough. I've seen it when they actually have to make a move before an election. And when they really have to, they do. Now, I think what they figure is we ain't going to be forced to do nothing in a hurry, because inflation, even if it picks up a little, is not going to soar. And because they're pretty much convinced that the growth will come in close enough to 2%, that's the potential, that they won't have to do anything in that direction. So I think they're just sitting back and feeling pretty good about relaxing.
So, Andrew, if monetary policy takes a little bit of a back seat in this election year, is the bigger risk fiscal policy? Where do you view the two?
Sure, there is some room for something like a payroll tax cut. You might see some motion on that, or an infrastructure plan has been talked about for years, but we've really seen no progress on that. So there's certainly incentive to spice things up on the fiscal side ahead of the election. But right now there's a lot going on the political front. So until some of that clears up, until we get a bit closer, and if the economy, if it does pick up on its own, maybe we don't need that. So at the moment, 2% growth is about potential. It's about what again, as officials are expecting. And the one thing to watch tomorrow in the minutes could be a bit more color on not just the repo, the plumbing issues in financial markets, but also basically what sort of material change would qualify as reason to move rates. And it'll be in the realm of speculation for a few months now, or a few months or quarters ahead, but they could start to lay out certain levers that may be important. And I don't think a weaker job growth will necessarily spook the Fed. If we see job growth even slow in coming quarters to more like 100,000, that's a level that Fed officials are well comfortable with as more of a full employment pace of job growth. So that wouldn't be one thing.
And I love it when you refer to the repo issue as a plumbing issue. If you're in these markets, if you have to trade on they certainly are day to day, have a lot of importance and drama, but for a lot of people step back and say the Fed's handling it, they'll continue to handle it. And I think you're absolutely right. Whatever we get from this sense of, well, gosh, what would you